I'll give it one more minute.
Yeah, that's
So I'll go ahead and start now. I hope that's okay.
yeah, that's
So
perfect, Claire.
thank you. So my name's Claire. I'm the Healthcare Partnership Manager for Northamptonshire for URGO Medical, and I'm here today with my colleague Angie, who is the clinical specialist for the same area. So thank you very much for inviting us along to attend your teaching time and to introduce the concept and URGO K2 to you. Hopefully you will have at some point used the K4 system. Just to let you know that the URGO K4 is going to be replaced in January with the URGO K2 system, which we hope that you will find a really positive switch, because using the URGO K2 system, you get the best of both worlds. So you have both your short stretch and your long stretch bandage within there, which Angie will touch on in a second. So it's a multi-component system, and multi-component systems were referenced in the last compression Cochrane review as being the gold standard for compression and achieving that 40 millimeters of mercury. With URGO K2, you get both the full, which is the 40 millimeters of mercury system, and you also get the URGO K2 reduced, which is 20 millimeters of mercury for patients that for whatever reason may be they can't have that full compression utilized. So it's combining the benefits of a short stretch and a long stretch bandage and really aiding those patients to return to healing. Okay. So URGO Medical, we really promote three principles for safe and effective compression, which are the 3 C's. So we have consistent, we have comfortable, and we have continuous. And the reason that they're important is from a consistent perspective, you're getting the same level of compression, whether your patient is walking around or whether they are bed bound, whether they are shuffling from the living room through to the kitchen, or whether they are active at work. It will consistently ensure that they get either that 40 millimeters of mercury for full compression or that 20 millimeters of mercury for the reduced compression. We want to ensure that it's comfortable for our patients. Again, you may have experienced patients who, as the edema is coming in, perhaps the bandages start slipping because they're not compressed to the leg anymore because that edema has gone in, which makes it quite uncomfortable. Equally, for patients who may find that they perhaps have to sleep with their leg out of bed at night because they can't have it lying flat, or uncomfortable in another way. We really want to ensure that we're getting that comfortable compression, because it's well known that if patients are comfortable, then they're going to be more compliant patients, and they will keep the compression in being used as much as they should. And we want to ensure that it's continuous. So patients are again achieving that continuous compression. So again, it doesn't matter whether they're at rest or whether they're walking around, they will be achieving that 40 millimeters of mercury or 20 millimeters of mercury. So very much the 3 C's: continuous, consistent, and comfortable. With the comfortable, 95% of patients found URGO K2 was comfortable during the day, and 92% of patients found Ergo K2 deliver that comfortable compression throughout the evening. From your perspective as well, as you're learning to use a new compression system, we have a study which was done on nurses. It's called the Hannah study, and it was looking at the 3 different compression systems and how clinicians found the ease of application of all 3 systems. With the Ergo K2, after watching a video, 85% of nurses achieved therapeutic pressure at first application, which is fantastic. So we know, or hopefully we're sharing with you, that Ergo K2 is supported by the highest level of evidence. So this is the pyramid of evidence, and we're not saying that anything at the bottom isn't important, but what happens is you get lots of things at the bottom, and case series and case reports, and as we go up the triangle, as we reach the pointy top, you have less and less evidence that sits there. From an Ergo K2 perspective, both Yuma and Cochrane have supported the Ergo K2 multi-layer component system. So Yuma multi-component bandages are more effective than single component bandages. So that's both because it combines both the short and the long stretch. It's not that it's got more layers to it, it's just the short and long stretch combined. And from a Cochrane perspective, multi-component systems containing an elastic bandage appear to be more effective than those composed mainly of inelastic constituents. So again, it's just showing you that it's got the highest level of evidence that sits behind it. So a multi-component system such as Ergo K2 has 2 different types of compression applying bandages that both apply a level of compression. So that's our short and our long stretch. Whereas a multi-layer system, which you might hear from time to time, is when a system contains more than one bandage. So for example, a 4-layer as the K4 system is a multi-layer system, but it isn't a multi-component system. So hopefully that makes sense for you all. And I'm just going to pass across to Angie.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you for everyone for having us this afternoon as well. So following on from what Claire has said, I'm going to look at the 2 different URGO K2. So you've got Ergo K2 full, which gives you that 40 millimeters of mercury, and then you've got your Ergo K2 reduced, which gives you that 20 millimeters of mercury. They also come in 2 different sizes. So as you can see with the image on the left, I hope it's on the left of your screen, we've got an 18 to 25 centimetre ankle circumference and a 25 to 32 centimetre ankle circumference. Now these measurements are taken after you've reshaped that limb and protected those bony areas. So once you've reshaped it with your K-Soft and your wadding that you're using, reshape so you've got that nice conical shape, protected that tibial crest, those bony areas as well. Then you measure the ankle just above that ankle bone and take that measurement as to which kit you need to use. So whether it be the 18 to 25 or the 25 to 32. It is available in latex free, as it says there as well. So latex free, if you have any of those patients with latex allergies or you have latex allergies yourself, then it is available in latex free as well. And also it's licensed for that edema and lymphedema as well. But I think there's a slide further on where we can talk about that. Next slide, then, Claire. There we go. So as Claire said, it's a multi-component system. So it's got your short stretch bandage and your long stretch bandage within it. So your short stretch bandage is the K-Tech. And within your full compression kit, that provides 30 millimeters of the compression that's needed for your patient. Your short stretch bandages, they give you that high amount of pressure when the patient is active, when that calf muscle is active. So if we've got an active calf muscle, what happens is when we've applied that short stretch bandage, because we apply it at full stretch, if any of you have used short stretch in the past, the calf muscle will contract and it will bound against that short stretch bandage. It then give that massage effect and help with that venous return up that lower limb. So you've got that massage effect when that patient's mobile. It's also got a certain amount of absorbency as well to that layer. Your long stretch bandage, that provides 10 millimeters of mercury. So in total, with the 30 and the 10, you've got your 40 millimeters for that full compression there. It gives you that pressure as well when the patient is resting. So your short stretch works best when the patient is active. Your long stretch bandage can work when the patient's active, but also when they're resting. It's a bit like, I don't like to say elastic band, but it's elastic band effect where it's giving that constant squeeze to that lower limb. Okay, so it then keeps the system as well. It keeps that K2 system in place for up to 7 days. So once you're reducing that edema in that limb, because of that elasticity within that K-press bandage, it's squeezing in and keeping that bandage in place so it doesn't slip. You don't get much slippage from there. Okay, I'm going to move on, Claire. So as you can see at the top, we need to ensure, it's really important to ensure that limb is assessed as well before we're applying that bandage. We need to protect and pad out so we've got that conical shape. We need that conical shape to give our graduated compression using this system. So you measure the ankle and then choose the correct kit is what you need. It says there that URGO K2 can be used for a circumference greater than 32 centimetres. It can. You still will be giving compression to that patient, but if you think about it, it's the first time that patient's having this compression system on, then hopefully within that week or two, some of that edema will reduce. So the ankle circumference will fit into that category of 25 to 32 centimetres. It's got your accurate pressure on application. So within it, you've got, as you can see, I don't know whether Claire's able to do a little circle around those pressure indicators for me as you're in control. Don't worry if you can't, even if you use your mouse, it's not a problem. There you go. So as you can see on the bandages, you've got pressure indicators on there. So without any stretch to them, they actually look like rugby balls. What we need to be doing when we're applying it is stretching them so they actually look like footballs. So you're going from rugby balls to footballs to ensure that you're getting that accurate amount of compression. For those that you've used the K4 system, I've used the K4 system as well. What it could actually mean is sometimes we're stretching it out to 100% and reducing back to 50% when we use that long stretch system, aren't we? But what happens is my 50% stretch could be somebody else's 60 or somebody else's 40. With this, you've got the pressure indicators on there to say that you're giving that correct amount of pressure and that stretch to that bandage. So from footballs to rugby balls. So you've got consistency there. So each of the clinicians that are applying it, they're all doing the rugby balls to footballs, and the patient's getting consistency with the amount of compression that's being delivered to them. You've also got, with those pressure indicators, not only are you stretching them from rugby balls to footballs, but you're also overlapping those balls. So you get ensuring that you're getting the correct amount of overlap from that bandage. So it's basically rugby balls, footballs, and cover the balls. I will show you a video in a minute, which might make it a little bit more easy to understand as well. So as it says there, 80% of the nurses reach that recommended pressure of 40 millimeters of mercury at the ankle on that first application, with only 25% of nurses reach that recommended pressures using Actico. So if we're comparing the two, you've got your comparisons there, and that's on the study that Claire mentioned earlier. Do you want to move on, Claire, for me? Okay. It can stay in place for up to 7 days. So those compression systems, the K2 can stay in place for up to 7 days. It effectively reduces that edema because it's got that short stretch system in there, and it's got the long stretch system of those bandages in there. So your K-Tech is your short stretch bandage, effectively reduces that edema with that massaging effect. Your K-Press is that long stretch and adjusts to the limb size. So the reduction of that limb, reduction of that edema, that K-Press will also help keep those bandages in place. Okay, so when we say it's effectively reduces edema, it does reduce that edema. We've got that short stretch system within that as well. So you can use it on any of these disease progressions. We've got venous edema, you've got your lymphedema, you've got your secondary lymphedema as well. It's when we've got more misshapen and there's more severe lymphedema within that we need to be thinking about our other systems and looking further into that patient and how we can help them. So you're looking at your other short stretch systems when we've got that secondary lymphedema there. So when we've got the venous edema, lymphedema, secondary lymphedema due to that swelling, that congestion, the failure of the lymphatic system and the lymphatic drainage there, and we've got that regular shaped limb that we can use. It's when the limbs are quite misshapen and we've got those folds within the skin and those severe skin changes that we need to be thinking about something, another system to be using and moving on to. But other than that, K2 can be used on all those different kind of limb shapes. So it can be used on the lymphedema and your lymphovenous and also the venous edema as well. Thank you, Claire. And there you go. It's proven as well. So we've got the evidence out there. Claire spoke about the evidence earlier on, and it's proven there to reduce that leg ulcer surface area. We know that when we're dealing with a patient with poor venous disease, we have to deal with what's going on within that limb. Okay, we can put all the dressings we like on the outside of there, but we know it's compression that's required to get that venous return back and working again. So as you can see there, 86% of patients improved or healed after 6 weeks of treatment. 58.5% of the average ulcer surface area reduced after 6 weeks. So it's proven there. You've got the proof, you've got the evidence there as well to prove that this actually works. Thank you, Claire. Okay, and then to end it, before I show you our lovely video, which I hope works, I've got everything crossed. So which of your patients could benefit from the K2? We've got your full compression of your 40 millimeters of mercury. You've got your mild, your reduced compression of 20 millimeters of mercury, and it delivers that continuous therapeutic pressures at all levels. So each clinician will be applying it the same. They've got the rug balls to footballs, and you cover the balls as you apply it. So you're getting consistency for that patient, and they're getting a consistent amount of compression that's required. So it delivers that consistent pressure, ensures that you've got that easy, accurate application as well with that pressure indicators on there. Delivers comfortable compression, supporting that patient day and night. So they're getting continuous compression throughout the day and throughout the night, and effectively reduces edema and stays into place for up to 7 days. And as we said, it's supported by that highest level of evidence. If you want to know more about that evidence, then do let us know. Claire and I are more than happy to send that evidence on to you. Next page, Claire. That one. And that's the end. So I'm going to show you guys a quick video. Please shout out to me if this video doesn't work. I know Teams sometimes does like to play games with me. Okay, so I'm just going to try and share this. So bear with.
There's a few questions.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Sorry, Melanie. I was just going to say,
okay.
We'll go back. I'm just looking.
Do you want me to answer them now or after the video? Because there may be a few more.
I don't know if you want to do these ones first, do you, Angela? Just
Okay.
so you've not got so many piled up. So I think the first one that came up was, is this going to be on ONPOS?
Yes.
Fantastic. That was a nice, easy yes.
It will be on ONPOS. We are expecting it to be an ONPOS in January.
Okay.
Obviously, there's some competencies that need to be ensured that people can practice with it safely. So we will be supporting training and education to ensure that people can do that. But I think we're expecting it to be January.
Okay, perfect. Next question, patients with abnormal Doppler readings, can they have reduced compression?
Abnormal Doppler readings, are we talking below 0.6? Or what are we classing as abnormal, or is it above 1.3?
If you could put that in the chat box, Alison, that would be wonderful. We'll move on to the next one for now. What is the criteria for using the reduced system?
So it's usually, I look back onto your area's policy and procedures and lower limb regarding this as well. It's usually, in most areas, it's usually 0.6 to 0.8. You'd use that reduced compression, but it also depends on the patient and the patient's medical conditions as well, whether it be heart failure, whether it be renal failure, and also discussing that with TVNs and the GPs and any MDTs involved with those patients. But if we're looking at your TBPI readings, ABPI reading, sorry, I'm doing a TBPI, I'm going ahead of myself. An ABPI reading is usually 0.6 to 0.8, but I would be doing that thorough holistic assessment with that patient as well as to whether they should be going into that reduced compression.
Lovely. Next question, can the system be used for patients who do not have edema and whose ankle measurements do not reduce to less than 32 centimetres?
Okay, so yes, it can still be used above 32 centimetres. You just won't be delivering that optimum amount of compression, that 40 millimetres of mercury, but it still can be used. They will still be getting compression from that. And if we're talking along the other aspect, if there's patients with no edema and they've got those small legs and those slight legs and they fit within the 18 to 25 centimetre kit, and if they've, it's very rare that we get a patient with an ankle circumference less than 18, then you would just pad that out to make it fit above the 18, so it goes into the 18 to 25 centimetre kit. I'm hoping with a leg that small anyway, we'd be looking at protecting that limb and those bony areas as well. So you'd pad it out, remeasure, so it's above that 18 centimetre.
Lovely, thank you. And
I hope that
Alison,
answers.
yeah, Alison got back to us. She said both outside normal range.
Both
So I think
outside
she
normal
means,
range.
yeah.
Okay, so if it's below your 0.6, do look at the policies and procedures in your area as well, because it differs everywhere that I work. Then I would be referring them on to either whether you do it through your TVNs, whether you do it through the GPs and refer them on to vascular. So if it's 0.6, if I'm thinking of 0.6, to me that says there's 60% or less arterial flow through the arteries. I'd be wanting to check that out and find out what's going on. If it's 1.3 and above, then you're thinking there might be atherosclerosis in there as well. I'd be wanting to do all their bloods and looking at the cholesterol and refer them on for further investigations.
Perfect.
If that makes sense, yeah.
That's perfect, Angela. There's one more on there, and then we'll move on to your video. You said to measure ankles once wadding on. So are we putting on wadding bandage first, then K2 system?
Yes. So the joy of K2, and hopefully you'll get to see this in real life practice as well when we come in, and hopefully URGO are going to be around and looking at doing the competencies for you. You put your wadding on first. It doesn't have to go from toe to, I don't want to complicate things. It doesn't have to go from toe to below knee, the wadding, but it does need to protect and reshape that limb. Okay, so you do that, you reshape it so you've got a nice conical shape, protecting the tibial crest and malleoli as well, protecting that area. They're usually the ones that have those issues. And then you measure the ankle and choose the kit. That makes sense?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then we've
The
got
only time.
more.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. Don't apologise. It's nice.
Is this better than hosiery kits and ready wraps that deliver 40?
It's a good question, and it is all very dependent. It's very subjective as well with compression hosiery kits and wraps. You know, your patients are there, they can perhaps remove kits, they can perhaps remove wraps and undo the wraps and lessen that amount of compression that's being applied. All depends on the ulcer as well. If you've got a circumferential leg ulcer, then really do we want to be putting them into hosiery kits and wraps? I think they'd be more beneficial from bandages. If there's lots of exudate coming from those wounds as well, then I'll be thinking about more along the lines of bandages rather than hosiery kits and wraps. Hope that answers your question.
Perfect.
So I did see one question come up then.
Yeah, I just saw that about you need to be assessed first by an ergo rep before using the system and be signed off. So we're just waiting to find out from the TBN team about the competencies and how they will be dealt with. So yeah, as soon as we have that, you know what I mean.
We have that process in place. As soon as we've got that.
Thank you, Angie. Then we'll be able to support you through that.
Definitely. And we're at the end of a phone. Our emails, you know, they're readily available to you guys as well. So just with anything, any queries or anything like that, then just give us a call or email us, or whichever's more convenient for you. More than happy to advise.
And if you do want some training done at your practice, then we do have a clinical trainer and a product specialist who are more than happy to come out and sit with you, do some training with you, so that you've got that understanding of the system. So it may be that you're not necessarily using it immediately, but you have a good understanding of the system for when you do come to do your competencies. So if you do want that, then Melanie is you're more than welcome to pass on our details and we will arrange that.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Our clinical trainer is TVN as well based. She was a nurse, and myself, clinical specialist, leg ulcer nurse for many years before I came to this role as well. So we are clinical as well, so we can answer those questions for you. Any other questions?
Before I show you in a minute.
Excellent. I'll show you our lovely video then. I hope you all enjoy and I hope it works. Hope and pray. Okay, so bear with me.
URGO K2 is available for ankle sizes 18 to 25 centimetres and 25 to 32 centimetres. The full compression kits of URGO K2 deliver an average of 40 millimetres of mercury at the ankle, and the reduced kits deliver an average of 20 millimetres of mercury at the ankle. URGO K2 has a unique pressure system to aid application. By selecting the correct size, achieving the correct stretch, and applying the correct overlap, the correct therapeutic compression is achieved. In order to guide the correct stretch and correct overlap, URGO K2 features a pressure indicator. When applying compression, the bandage is stretched so that the pressure indicator forms a circle. The bandage is now at the correct tension. URGO K2 kits for 18 to 25 centimetre ankles have the pressure indicator printed in the top half of the bandage, which aids a 50% overlap. URGO K2 kits for 25 to 32 centimetre ankles have the pressure indicator printed in the middle of the bandage, which aids a 2/3 overlap. URGO K2 reduced compression bandages have an R printed in the middle of the pressure indicator to ensure they can be easily identified. Before applying URGO K2, measure the circumference of the leg 2 centimetres above the malleolus. Choose the appropriate kit size. Ensure the foot is at a 90-degree angle, toes to nose. For the 18 to 25 centimetre kit, make sure that the pressure indicator is pointing away from the toes and towards the patient. Start bandaging with K-Tech at the base of the toes, ensuring the bandage is at the same level at the back of the foot. Use 1 or 2 turns to secure K-Tech in place around the foot. Do not apply full compression over the foot. K-Tech should be stretched just enough to keep it in place. Compression is applied from the malleolus. Stretch K-Tech so that the pressure indicator changes from an oval to a circle. Apply K-Tech in a spiral up the leg, overlapping to the bottom of the pressure indicator so that the correct overlap is achieved. Note that for the 18 to 25 centimetre ankle kits, the overlap is 50%. For the 25 to 32 centimetre ankle kits, the overlap is 2/3. Ensure that there are no gaps where edema could gather. Finish bandaging 2 centimetres or 2 finger widths below the popliteal space. Cut off any excess bandage, as overwrapping will increase the pressure and could cause pressure damage. Apply tape to secure K-Tech in place. This completes the application of K-Tech. Check that the ankle is still at 90 degrees before applying K-Press. Apply K-Press over K-Tech, ensuring there is a small border of K-Tech at the toes. A cuff of fluff. This prevents K-Press from rubbing on the skin. Secure the ankle with a figure of 8. As with K-Tech, compression begins at the malleolus. Stretch the pressure indicator to form a circle, but be careful not to overstretch to the shape of a beach ball. Spiral up the leg as before, covering the pressure indicator to achieve the correct overlap. When the knee is reached, ensure there is a border of K-Tech above K-Press. Cut off any excess bandage and press down gently to ensure full cohesion. Check that the patient feels comfortable. The application of URGO K2 is now complete.
I'll just come back to you all now. Okay, so I must stress on that video that patient had the perfect leg shape. Okay, so it's not very often, in fact very rare, that we find those patients with a perfect leg shape. So that's why they measured that ankle with no wadding or no protection and no reshaping of that limb. That is the only reason. The majority of our patients that we see out there, we will need to reshape and protect those bony areas. So you do measure after you've put the wadding on, just to confirm that. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Run 2 minutes over my time.
Yeah, I think we're waiting for the next speaker, so you're okay.
Okay.
Do you still need wadding under this? That's from Claire. And then we have, don't you routinely use K-Soft under bandages?
It's with K2, the URGO K2, if you've got a perfect leg and a perfect leg shape and no bony areas, which is, like I say, very, very rare, then you don't have to. But the majority, like I said, of our patients need that wadding underneath the K2 system to protect the bony areas and reshape.
Perfect.
I hope that's not confused you.
We've got another question just come in. Could you please clarify which is the reduced compression?
So the reduced compression is the one with the R on it on the bandages saying reduced, and it's the 20 millimeters of mercury. And it also states on the box as well, it says reduced compression on there. Both the reduced and the full compression come in both ankle circumference sizes, which is your 18 to 25 and your 25 to 32. That makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's it in terms of questions. Yeah, I think that's it.
And Holly, I'm just in the process of activating for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for coming along today.
Thanks for having us.
Like Claire and Angela both said, if you make contact with the trainer, I'm happy for you to email me directly. I'll put my email in the chat again. If you would like them to come out and do some training with your nurses, and then I can link the two up. That's fine. Lovely. Thank you, Matt. Oh,
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Take care. Have a lovely day.
Nice to meet
thank
you all.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Just a quick note. I'm just reading your message, Lydia. Yeah, we're currently in conversations with the TVN nurses at the minute, and they've promised by sort of mid-December they'll have dates for compression training for next year. There'll be various different courses, so check out the website around December, January time. Craig does send out targeted emails, so hopefully we'll be able to get something across to you. Craig, can I just check, is Holly set up now?
No, I'm struggling to find her on the list, which is very strange. Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do is just activate everybody's.
There's Holly. Hi, Holly. Bless you. Hear you. There it is. Nope, still can't hear you.
You should be able to. Hang on. Holly, which email address have you come in on? Oh, can't hear you, obviously. Because for some reason you're not coming up on the list at all.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you everyone for being patient. Well, technical
Got you.
issues.
There we go. Got it. Holly, all yours. You should be fine now.
No, it's- Still can't hear you, Holly. You might have to act out this.
According to this, your microphone is on, so I think there's a problem at your end. Could I suggest maybe leave the meeting, come back in? That'd be great. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
can
got you now.
hear you.
Yay! Oh, thank God.
Oh,
I
bless
hate
you.
technology.
Oh, I know. And thank you so much, Holly. Just to mention to everyone, I think we discussed, I don't know who knew or what's been said, but the session was nearly cancelled very last minute. The speaker wasn't able to attend this session. So Holly's swooped in and saved the day. So she's going to be talking to us about infection prevention control. In terms of this cleanliness report discussion that we've had previously, I'm not sure, because I've not had an opportunity to speak to Holly yet about today's presentation, what exactly, how much will be covered in that. But I am going to link up with Sharon at the CCG, and hopefully in the new year, we will run another session, which hopefully will cover that as well. So if we don't cover everything today, we will absolutely make sure it gets done in the February session. And over to you now, Holly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Craig. I have spoken to Jenny Boyce this morning, and I'm happy to go through the national standards. So that's absolutely fine. We'll carry on as planned if you'd like.
Lovely, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Sline. I'm one of the infection control nurses at Northampton General Hospital. But do a lot of work with Jenny Boyce and with Sharon in the ICB, working as a system to keep patients everywhere in the county safe from infection prevention. And yes, as Mel says, due to other commitments, Jenny and Sharon couldn't join today, so they've asked me just to step in and run through the national standards for cleanliness for you. And the first thing I want to say is, don't panic. It's a massive document, and it looks really sort of unyielding. I think when I first landed on my desk, I thought, oh my goodness. But actually, the cleaning that we give hasn't really changed. There's a bit of the assurance around it has, but the bulk of the national standards, what we clean and how we clean it, isn't changing. So I just really want to start by reassuring you, those of you in particular that have got to implement this in your practice, don't panic. You can do this. You'll be absolutely fine. There's still 50 elements of the big list of 50 elements of things that are in healthcare settings, and you just go, the first thing to do, or the place where I start really, is to go through that list of the 50 elements and look at what is in my healthcare setting, and those that aren't, you don't need to worry about. So it already makes it more manageable. And the same things are on there as before. Sorry, I'm in our shared office today, in the infection control office at the General, so it's a bit of a noisy old place, so apologies for any background noise. But things like weighing scales, couches, chairs, toilets, sinks, flooring, high, low, medium surfaces are all exactly the same. If you don't have things like commodes and hoists in your setting, don't worry about them. To go through the elements, pick out the ones that are relevant to your setting and your practice, and then look at who's responsible for cleaning each element. And some bits of nursing equipment, like weighing scales, perhaps blood pressure cuffs, will be nurses' responsibility to clean, or healthcare workers. But the majority will be the domestic or the housekeeper or the cleaner's responsibility to be cleaning waiting areas, chairs, couches, toilets, just as they do now. And the frequency for how often things are cleaned, again, hasn't changed in the national standards. What they have changed is the functional risk ratings. So they've changed a little bit which areas fall into a very high risk, which fall into high risk, and which fall into medium risk. But for GP settings and outpatient settings, we now sit in functional risk rating 4. So when you look in the appendices of the national standards, you'll see everything relating to functional risk rating 4. It tells you how often, for each of those 50 elements that apply to you, how often they need to be cleaned or checked. There's actually a lot of checks at functional risk 4 level ratings. Some things don't need to be cleaned every day, but they need to be checked. Some things need to be cleaned weekly, some things, windows and things, even less often, but it is all there. And the appendixes, I think I wouldn't worry too much about the bulk of the document, but the appendix section of the document's the really, really useful bit to tell you what your elements are, and then how in FR4, how often you have to clean them. And the audit's just the same. So we'll be auditing quarterly for most areas in practices. Those of you that audit monthly because you have treatment rooms or theatre spec rooms or procedure rooms who've come under the FR2 ratings, now you'll still be under the FR2 ratings and you'll still audit monthly. But they're just the same, quarterly for most, and the audit templates will be just the same. So the big change, and you've already gathered I'm not very good at technology, the big change, if I try and share my screen, is can you see this lovely star rating?
Yeah, we can.
The big change is that now what they like to see in waiting areas or at entrances to healthcare settings, or for us, every entrance to every ward, they want to see the star rating. So the name of the area, the date it was audited, and what that star, whether it got 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, or 1 star. And again, in the appendix section, it goes through with you what your star rating is. So for each FR rating, if you score so many percentage below the threshold, you would get a lower star rating. I know FR2 really well because our wards are FR2, and for those they have to hit 95% to get their 5-star rating. If they hit 92 to 94%, they get a 4-star. If they hit 88 to 90, 90 to 92, 3-star, 88 to 92 star, and it goes down like that. But again, it's in there and it's easy just to go and have a look and pick it out for you. But what they want to see moving forwards is one of these signs in the waiting areas or entrances to healthcare settings. And they also, I'm so sorry, and they also want to see a charter, a commitment to cleanliness charter. And again, both of these are national templates designed by NHS England, and you just localise it. So you can see this one's got our trust logo on, and our Director of Nursing and Chief Exec, but we've changed that, and Jenny Boyce has done this already, so she'll send these templates out to you. They're ready to go. And and so they've got the charter for the public to see, really, that we take, as I know you all do, we take cleaning seriously. It's everyone's responsibility, and that having a clean environment is really, really important to protecting patients from infections. And it says what we will do, in that we will provide a clean healthcare environment, and what we ask patients and visitors to do as well, to tell us if they find anything that they're not happy with or anything that doesn't look clean. And then there's the cleaning tasks, frequencies and responsibilities on there to give them a flavour of who cleans what, and that we know what we're doing in our healthcare setting. And at the bottom, I'm sure you're all familiar already with the colour coding scheme, but it's always lovely just to see that in the public place, because it just reminds us when we should be using red mops, when we should be using blue mops, reds for toilets, blues for general areas, and that we're not using the toilet mops where we shouldn't be, is the important thing. So here is the link, and I can put the link in the chat as well if that helps you. And here's what the document looks like, but I'll pop that in the chat for you, and then you can have a look. But as I say, don't be alarmed is my real takeaway. I thought, oh God, it's going to take me forever to do this. But paste, but there's not actually a lot that's changed. That's come out in really big writing for some reason. Jenny Boyce, our community infection prevention lead, has got all of the charters, all of the star ratings, all of the grids that you need to put your elements in and work out who's to be responsible, and all of the assessments for you to do. So Mel, she thought if you emailed her, she could then reply, send the pack to you so that you could then disseminate it out to everyone. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
rather than it being a bit bitty and emailing her. But if you've got any queries when you have a look at the pack, anything you're not sure about or anything you want to talk through, Jenny's more than happy to go through it with you. But as I say, I looked at it and actually it's really quite simple. Nothing's changed. It's just having that extra star rating and the extra charter. And there's also one extra audit, which is an efficacy audit, which is a really new change. And that's an annual audit that they're asking for us to complete. There's the audit template is in the back in the appendix, and Jenny's got that ready for you to have as well. And that's actually a really good addition to national standards for cleaning, because that audit is looking at cleaning technique. And are we cleaning in the right way? Because in some instances, and I'll talk about a ward, perhaps I can't comment on primary care, but on some of the wards I look and we watch and we're working really hard and we're cleaning, but actually we're just spreading the germs, and because we're not cleaning the right technique, we're not either perhaps re-dipping that cloth back in the water, or we're not using our S shape to clean, or we're using the wrong colour coded equipment in the wrong area. So the efficacy audit is actually a really good audit for that assurance that actually, yes, we are, everything is clean and we're cleaning in the right way. Does that make sense? If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if you want to have a think about it, have a read about it, and wait for the pack to come from Jenny, and then we can meet again, or Jenny can help as well. But I think don't be alarmed. Okay. And the other thing we just wanted to cover this afternoon was gloves. We've been working really hard as we've coming out of pandemic and out of COVID to remind staff really how we used to wear gloves. I think through COVID, PPE's become more important than ever before, hasn't it? It's been something we've been worried about running out of, something we've had to wear more than ever, rely on more than ever. In hospital setting, in GP settings, in patients' own homes, we've worn more PPE than we have for years and years before. And the guidance changed and changed and changed and changed, didn't it? It used to come through on a 10 to 5 on a Friday afternoon, and quite often we used to be distraught at another change, because you think the staff have only just got used to the last change and we're changing again, and people don't know if they're coming or going. So we've had a big focus here in the summer on being PPE free. It's actually okay now for patients that are symptom free, that are asymptomatic, haven't got any respiratory viral symptoms. It's okay not to wear gloves, and it's okay not to wear aprons. It's okay to touch patients' arms again and clean our hands. There's nothing better than cleaning our hands. And there's a regional gloves off campaign that's launching this week, because as a region we've seen in all healthcare settings, we've seen increased use in inappropriate PPE, and I'm sure you know the unintended harm that can cause if we've touched one patient or something that's contaminated with our gloves on, and we then go to the next patient or touch something else that we then contaminate something else. And just stopping and changing our PPE and cleaning our hands, or not having that PPE on in the first place if we didn't need it, is actually much safer. We've seen increase in staff with dermatitis as well as a result of wearing gloves for such a much larger part of the day that they didn't used to. So there's going to be a different theme every month. October and November, we're in November already, I mean. November's theme is seasonally around vaccinations. So it's about giving IM and subcut injections, and that it's absolutely okay to do that with no gloves on, and cleaning your hands before and after. So look out for those coming out soon. They've done some really good videos as well, where you can see the bugs and you can see how we inadvertently transfer bugs from one patient to another, or from one surface to another, when we have those gloves on and we don't clean our hands. So there's some really good short and sharp reminders to get us back to that good practice that we had pre-COVID. I can see Olivia said in the chat, what about use of masks? Is that face masks, Olivia, I'm presuming? We had for a long time, we had face masks mandated to us through the national guidance, through the NHS England and the URGO national guidance. And from, I think, July time, they localised that decision making, and they've said that, yeah, it's face masks, and they've said to us that it's up to local organisations to make decisions about whether they want to wear face masks or not. And we based that on community prevalence at the time, staff related COVID sickness at the time. For hospital setting, we based it on outbreaks as well, patients having hospital acquired COVID and outbreaks of COVID. But generally, through triangulating those three sets of data, practices can then decide, do they want to wear health masks in their practice or not? A lot of healthcare settings are wearing masks at the moment, and I think as we transcend into winter, we were on a regional call on Monday looking at the flu data, and already that flu curve has started in the last week to increase across the Midlands, and we're seeing patients admitting into ED throughout the region with flu. So I just think we knew, or we suspected it was going to come, didn't we? We suspected it was going to come early. It normally starts at Christmas time. But I think we're just at the start of a bit of a flu curve as well. So wearing masks is going to keep us safe from that as well. I don't know about you, but those of you with little ones, both of mine have had a dreadful cold last week and a tummy bug this week. So there's just so many germs out there as we're all circulating, and we have no COVID precautions out in the community anymore. So my advice would be to stay in masks in healthcare settings, but that it is within your gift now to choose what you want to do based on our local data. I hope that helps answer your question, Olivia. And Debbie, where are these videos accessed? That's a really good question. They are currently with the comms teams for NHFT and the comms teams for the ICB. So they'll be starting to send them out in the next week or so. So through normal communication cascade channels, but what works really well, they've done some e-posters as well with them as well, so that we can have them as signatures and as screensavers and send them. I don't know about primary care in our hospital, we just function largely on WhatsApp these days. But if it's not on WhatsApp, it doesn't seem to happen, or it doesn't seem to be known about. But it's actually really good, because things like videos are a great way to put onto WhatsApp, to forward on from one team WhatsApp to another team WhatsApp, and they've had really good engagement from them. So they'll be coming out through the normal comms cascade in different formats, which will be really good. I can't think what else to tell you all. Is there anything else you want to know about?
There was a comment made at the start, Holly. I think it was from Sandra Cox. I think she said, we use IPC support material and audits. Should we be using the above standards rather than the IPC guidance?
For your cleaning audit?
Imagine. Could you clarify that, Sandra? But yeah.
If it's for your monthly or quarterly cleaning audits, I'd absolutely use the national standards. That's what we have to base our cleaning audits on. IPC do have audits, and we do go and do an annual check of the environment, or if we've had an outbreak. I think Daintre's got a bit of a outbreak at the moment. We'll go and do additional environmental cleanliness audits using IPC tools. But the expectation is that everywhere has a national standard cleaning audit. But again, there's some lovely templates that work's already been done for you. You've just got to start using it, really. We could have done with you having the pack before this. I think it would have been perhaps more helpful, wouldn't it, in a way?
And Holly, what about training? So for those practices that maybe have an IPC lead or are looking to develop somebody, where's best, and what's the best sort of training for them to access? Do you advise on any of that?
Yeah, this is something we could set up. We're just starting to do more IPC work across the system because of COVID and the pressures from it. We've all kind of gone a bit siloed, and it'd be brilliant to do some more sort of system-wide and some more investment in training, and have some IPC leaders and IPC links in some of the GP practices. It'd be absolutely phenomenal, and I think that's something we can set up. That Jenny and I can work together really to organise that, and then we can do some competencies for you, or have some study sessions. I don't know if those of you who probably worked, I don't know if you have them in the community, if you have like link nurse sessions for things, it'd be really good to have some IPC sort of dedicated time, learn more about cleaning, learn more about IPC practices, and be our champions. Fab.
Really useful.
Good.
We'll
if you want to nominate some people, that'd be great. And I'll speak to Jenny.
I think we did have, well before I started, we did have some do the RCN. I think we did have a group of nurses that did do that. So I think Sharon did ask me to kind of go away and see if we can collate some of that information. So if any of you on this call are one of those that did the RCN course, please let me know. And then for anybody that wants to do any more training, would it still be down the RCN kind of route?
Yeah, there's the RCN module, which is really good. There's a couple of MOOCs. I don't know if any of you have heard of the MOOCs, the massive online open courses. There's a great one on gloves, and appropriate glove use, when to wear gloves and not when to wear gloves, which is quite hot off the press at the moment. And there's a great, and these are online virtual courses as well, and are free, which is really unusual. And there's one on IPC, gloops. I'll write it in the chat. They're MOOCs. Sorry, I haven't had my lunch yet. I'm getting dry. Massive online open courses, they're called MOOCs. And there's a brilliant one just starting on glove use. And there's one up and running already about IPC, wider IPC. But I think whilst they're really useful, they don't always relate to local practice and local guidance, and it can be a bit frustrating that you learn more generic things from them rather than what we do in our system. And so it'd be brilliant, I think, to establish a bit of a network moving forwards, and work together,
Yeah,
keep patients safe
definitely.
and at home and well.
Great. Well, we can work on that in the background, so that would be really good. And then people can just come forward, you know.
Yeah, and I'm going to write your names down, those of you in the chat that are interested. And then we'll get something organised. It'd be really good. Okay. So we'll leave that as an action then. If Mel emails Jenny, Jenny can send all the packs over, have a really good look at them. And perhaps once we start our linked network, the first thing we could focus on is rolling out the standards and getting all your charters and your star ratings up and your elements all sorted. That could be our first project, couldn't it? Oh, there we go. Jane's done the RCN recently. Yeah, I agree, Jane. I took on, when I started an IPC, I thought, oh my God, it's such a steep learning curve, isn't it? Everyone thinks you're the hand washing police, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than that. So it'd be brilliant.
And it would be good to get a group up if people like Jane are just coming through or just completed, to get a network together would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Got a few.
Oh, marvellous. You're going to regret this, guys. I'm going to be harassing you. Okay. Anything else you want to know about IPC whilst you're here? We've had diphtheria was the other thing I was going to mention. I don't know if you've heard on your grapevines, we've had London hospitals or London hotels have housed a lot of asylum seekers coming into England, and because of the overcrowding in the London hotels, they've moved some of them to Birmingham and to Coventry hotels. And in the Coventry hotel, they've had an outbreak of diphtheria, which is something that for us, we are all vaccinated against and we don't see in this country. So the Coventry consultant microbiologists have developed a diphtheria pathway, and I'll get that off them and I'll share that with you. It shouldn't be something that will hit primary care or that we'll have to worry about, but I think it's quite interesting to see a infection that we haven't seen in this country really for a long time. So just to have it on your radars and share with your colleagues.
Quite a lot of interest.
I know, I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled. This is brilliant.
This is for secondary care only.
The star ratings are for every healthcare setting. Yeah, so they'll be expecting to see them in your waiting areas or at your entrances to GP practices. Yeah. And they're a national template again, so they're on the website, they're on that link there. And Jenny will send them out in your packs.
Questions in between all the yes, please.
You're really good. I really struggle to talk and look at the chat at the same time. So diphtheria was my other one. Monkeypox caused a bit of a storm, didn't it, a few months ago, but it's really settled down. And luckily it wasn't quite as infectious as they thought it might be to begin with. So we do still see the odd case popping up in the region, but just really sensible swabbing and sending home, and people have been really well and staying at home with it on the whole. So that's a relief, I think, particularly those of us in IPC and sexual health and some community settings where we were a bit worried for a minute there about the impact of that new infection. And I think just as we come into winter, I'm sure it's all on your radars already, but norovirus, the good old diarrhea and vomiting bug, is doing the rounds again. I've had my little ones off school this week, last week with it. It's just seems quite short-lived this year. It does seem to be, some years it's more vomiting than diarrhea, some years it's more diarrhea than vomiting, and some years it's both. Just depends on the strain that year. And this year it really is both ends seem to be affected, but very short-lived, just 24 hours or so. and then people getting better. But just be wary if you've got staff who have it, or patients who have it, they should stay home until they're symptom free for a good 48 hours and are eating and drinking again, and then come back to work or come in. Obviously, if they need urgent treatment, that's fine, but try and manage that safely and isolate. Don't sit in the waiting area. But if they can wait till they're better, it's so infectious. If you breathe in that vomit, there's a 70% chance that you're going to catch it, unfortunately. Trying to think of some good news to end on. All these bugs on the round, doing the rounds. And I'm sure you want nothing beats just good hand washing. That's the other thing I think with norovirus. We see from COVID so much reliance on alcohol gel, and alcohol gel being the quick and easy way to clean our hands. And it's beautiful for killing COVID, but it doesn't kill those diarrhea bugs, those tummy bugs, C. diff, as you know. So it's just prompting people to go back to good old soap and water, particularly if you're seeing patients with diarrhea. Okay.
Holly, am I right in thinking, this is just through conversations I had with Jenny, is there going to be a sort of wound pack, aseptic technique type policy, or there's something new coming out in the new year? Am I right? Did I pick that up right?
Not that I've heard of. Jenny might know
Okay.
something that I don't. They're updating the hygiene code, which is part of the Health and Social Care Act. The hygiene code, the guidance or the code that we have to give assurance on to regulators, to CQC and to the ICB, that we're delivering all of those systems and processes to protect patients from infections, from things like patient information to how we'd manage a patient with an infection, to policies and procedures and safe disposal of sharps, linen, waste, hand hygiene and PPE. ANTT is in there. It might be that they've changed the ANTT section, but there's no big changes to aseptic technique.
It could be something that I'm sure the tissue viability nurses wanted to do something on it, but I will do some digging.
Yeah.
Find out. Just checking there's no further questions for cleaning standards. CQC not needed in primary care. Can I clarify, please?
Yeah, Vicky, that's a good question. So Vicky's asked, the star ratings for cleaning standards been told they're not needed by the CQC. So Sharon and Jenny's interpretation is that they are expected, and the charters and the star ratings are expected to be displayed. But we can definitely confirm that then and come back to you if there's a bit of mixed messaging on that one. Oh, I'll be jealous if you don't have to do it and we do. I'll confirm that you and let you know. That's probably the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Has anybody else got any other questions? Otherwise, we will let Holly get to her lunch and a drink, and then we'll break for a few minutes and see if the next speaker can start maybe 5-10 minutes early. That way, you all get a quick coffee break or loo break, and then we can start again. Just give it a minute, just in case there's any last minute questions that pop up. Thank you so much, Holly, for today and saving the day very last minute. So
you're welcome.
I'm really pleased you could come. So thank you so much. I will make a note of, because I don't expect you to do that in between speaking, everybody that was interested in either doing some training or have already done the training and want to start sort of a network group, and then maybe I can speak to you and Jenny about that after. I'll collate all the names.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. Thank you. And we'll do that. That'd be wonderful.
Great.
All right, lovely to meet you all.
Thank you
so much for listening. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, everyone. So if we have a 5-minute tea break, toilet break, and I will reach out to the next speaker and just see if they can start slightly earlier. Hi, Lauren. Thank you. We'll give them 5 minutes if that's okay, just to quickly pop the kettle on, and then we can get started if that's okay. So if we say about 20 past. Is that okay? That just gives them a few minutes. Is that all right? Ah, we've got the whole hearing thing. I can't hear you.
I think Lauren's microphone's on mute.
Ah.
It's that schoolgirl error.
We
Normally
all
me.
do it.
I hadn't even realised I was talking away to myself. Mel, I might just have a go at sharing the presentation to make sure it's working my end.
Yeah, that's fine. A few people will be getting drinks and things, so we've got time. That's absolutely fine.
Lindsay, can you see that presentation or not?
I
Oh,
can't see it.
Could you see when I was sharing that or not?
I could, if it's any help, Lauren, I could see a black screen, so I could see that you were trying to share, but I couldn't actually see the presentation.
Mel, and have you? Oh,
Ah, I can see it now.
and is it in? Can you see? Is it in slideshow mode or is it?
Yes, 1 of 20. Yeah.
So I have a video
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to share. My only issue is I suspect it will knock me out of the presentation as I do it.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether to tissue viability. We're very clever and showed it at the end. I'm just going to try and play this now and see if I can stop it and start it without
Yeah, that's fine.
And Lindsay, did that move it along to the next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. That's brilliant.
Perfect. We'll just give a couple of more minutes and then we'll start.
before we start, I might just ask anyone that's here if they've used any of the CGM. I'll get you to put it in the chat function for me. I can see Hayley's here and Debbie's here. Afternoon, ladies. I should change my background. I look like I'm having a day at the beach, which would be lovely. Unfortunately not. It looks really good though. At least it's not boring. I'm in a children's hospital, and it's quite messy. So I thought I'd better change my background so everyone can see. A good idea.
I think we can start now, Lauren. I think most people will be back by now, won't they? Okay, everyone, we're going to start our next session today, which we're going to have Lauren Smith deliver today. So she will introduce herself officially. And as you can see from the front slide, this session is going to be on continuous glucose monitoring. Over to you, Lauren.
Oh, thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting us along to your PLT session. You actually have two of us presenting this afternoon. My name is Lauren Smith. I'm a senior diabetes specialist nurse for Northamptonshire Foundation Healthcare Trust, and I'm also we also provide an SLA agreement, so a service level agreement for Kettering Hospitals. So we provide some of their inpatient and outpatient nursing dietetic services. And I'm very pleased to have with me this afternoon Lindsay. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh yes, I'm Lindsay Turner. I'm one of the senior diabetes nurse specialists, and I work in the south of the county. So I cover community work for Northampton and Daventry area. Lauren.
Lovely, thank you. And so this afternoon we were asked to come along and talk to you about continuous glucose monitoring. And I must apologise, this typically should be a practical session really. So we have asked the companies that provide the continuous glucose monitoring, some of them anyway, to send along some samples after this session if anybody would like them. So we'll take some names in the chat function as we go along, and I'll check again at the end. So if anyone would like any samples, then we can get them sent along to you. So for the next short period, and I will apologise, and Lindsay will tell you I'm terrible for this, it is a little bit of death by PowerPoint. And the reason for that is we're quite happy to send you the slides at the end, so you've got some reference if you would like them. So I will try and share my screen with you. There is a short video in the middle of the PowerPoint as well, so we'll try and share it, but apologies if we have any technical issues along the way. Myself and Lindsay will be presenting, and Lindsay's going to answer some of the questions in the chat to begin with. So do ask us if there is anything as we go along, or at the end, we're quite happy to take some questions. So let me just So Lindsay, can you see that? Is it?
Yes, but I can't, it's not large on the screen.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just stop sharing it and share it again. Apologies, give me 2 seconds. Sorry. Sorry, everybody, give me 2 seconds. I've got PowerPoint live and it doesn't want to share. Let me try again. Is that large on the screen now, Lindsay?
No, it's still small on the screen, but try it in PowerPoint mode if you see whether it makes it larger with the first one. Now that's some completely different.
Yeah, I'm trying to share it. Sorry. I had it up to begin with.
Well, apparently everybody else can see that it's large for them. So
Oh,
give it a go. Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
Apologies, that's not a great start. So, as I mentioned, this is a talk on continuous glucose monitoring. And so continuous glucose monitoring is, we're really talking about the expanding role of continuous glucose monitoring. So, or CGM as we like to call it. And this is really thinking about how this will impact patients from a diabetes management point of view, but also thinking about how it will impact on staffing and what education, what resources we may need. So as I mentioned, we're from the diabetes team, and if there is any questions at the end, please send any questions, any referrals. If you need any more information, you can contact us on this email address, or you can contact us at the Diabetes Centre. And so I guess before we start to think about what glucose monitoring is, it's probably important to think about the history of diabetes, really. So over the last 100 years, diabetes management has massively changed, really. We've had recently 100 years of insulin, and it's not just the developments in insulin that have been significant throughout the years, but it's also the way in which we manage diabetes and think about the way in which we look after it. So there's technology developments continue and significantly really in the last 20 to 30 years. If we think about how our patients looked after their diabetes prior to the 1960s, it was very challenging. And we had the development of being able to check glucose levels by dropping a tablet into a test tube of Benedict solution, put it in some boiling water for 5 minutes, and the colour of the liquid would indicate how high your glucose level was. Up until about the 1960s, and then we had urinalysis strips developed so that we could dip urine and have a sort not an instant result, but a slightly more accurate result, but still depending on the colour of your urine to tell us the result, what your glucose levels were doing. In the 1980s, we saw the development of glucometer testing, so thinking about how patients could monitor their glucose levels. We saw glucometers becoming more common stay in the management of diabetes, and they are still obviously very much in practice today. So a drop of blood on a glucose strip into a monitor to tell us what our glucose level is. And more recently, and this is what we'll be thinking about today, is how we monitor glucose levels with something called a continuous glucose monitor. And so, as I said, it's commonly termed as CGM. And CGM is a small sensor that you wear. In this picture, you can see this patient's got a sensor on the back of their arm, and they've got a mobile phone device. And what a continuous glucose monitor does, it's a wearable sensor that sits on on the skin, and the monofilament sits in just under the skin, and it's measuring interstitial glucose levels. So it's not measuring the glucose in the blood, it's measuring the glucose that sits around and in the cells. Continuous glucose monitoring, as I said, have been around since about 2017 in Northamptonshire, and we're seeing their use exponentially increasing, and hence the reason for this session today, really. So I mentioned there, and apologies because it's quite difficult to read this slide. So when we're thinking about continuous glucose monitoring, we're thinking about what information that's given to our patients. So for our patients that are wearing a continuous glucose monitor, they're receiving glucose information every 5 or so minutes, and it will tell them what their glucose levels are doing. It is different to blood glucose monitoring. So if you have a patient that comes in to see you and they perform a capillary glucose test and they also scan at the same time, there will be difference. An interstitial glucose level is probably anything from 5 to 15 minutes behind, so there is a lag to it. And so for any of our patients that are using continuous glucose monitor, if they are having particularly high glucose levels or very low glucose levels, or their glucose levels are changing very quickly, the CGM may not give you information as quickly as you need. So there is still a time and a place for patients that will need to do finger prick testing, so capillary testing at times. But we are seeing continuous glucose monitoring and more sensors being available to our patients, and we're seeing it used more widely with our patients with diabetes. So it's really important to have an understanding of what continuous glucose monitoring is and think about where this potentially, who it should be offered to, and so we're having those appropriate referrals into the service, but also just thinking about what this means as an impact on any diabetes consultations that we're with our patients, and having that ability to have this conversation with them about their glucose levels. And so thinking about continuous glucose monitoring, guidance has changed. As I mentioned, it's been available on prescription since about 2017, 2018. And NICE have recently given us some updates on where CGM sits, so where it is placed with our patients. And so historically, CGM was, or as the slide says, it was initially known as Flash, was offered to predominantly patients with type 1 diabetes. And in Northamptonshire, we have, I think the last reports, we have potentially up to 80% of our population using continuous glucose monitoring. And we do have some patients with type 2 diabetes using continuous glucose monitoring, but not the same numbers as with our type 1 patients. And so NICE did also update their guidance not only for type 1 diabetes in April of this year, but also they've updated their guidance for type 2 diabetes. I'll come back to the type 1 diabetes in a minute because I'll have a slide to show you on from the tablet press that isn't out yet, but this is what we're expecting to come out, so that will sort of reinforce our information that we're sharing today about continuous glucose monitoring. But the type 2, and remember, NICE is guidance, so this is thinking about the practice that we can offer to our patients. And so NICE guidance talks about offering continuous glucose monitoring for people with type 2 diabetes. And it may be, and there's different types of continuous glucose monitoring. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But it's potentially available for patients with type 2 diabetes if there are multiple daily insulin injections and if they meet any of the following criteria. So if they're having recurrent hypoglycemia, so it may be severe hypoglycemia, if they may have impaired hypoglycemia awareness, for patients with type 2 diabetes that have a learning disability, and they're not able to monitor their glucose levels themselves with the traditional capillary blood glucose monitoring, then a CGM device may be appropriate for them and to support them with their diabetes management. It may be also for patients with type 2 diabetes that have been advised that they need to self-measure their glucose levels at least 8 times a day, that are insulin treated with type 2 diabetes. And also for anyone that's needing care workers or healthcare professionals to support them with their diabetes management if they're on insulin. So potentially some of those district nurses and some of those community patients that are looked after patients. Type 1 guidance has been around, and I think for any of you looking after patients with diabetes, you may be familiar with the guidance for type 1 diabetes. This will be reinforced in the tablet press. And so currently for patients with type 1 diabetes, the recommendation is they could be considered for continuous glucose monitoring if they are testing their glucose levels 8 times a day, so capillary testing, or if they have a HbA1c greater than 69 millimoles per mole. For anyone that's having disabling hypoglycemia also, and so this sort of sits in line with our guidance that we use also for insulin pump therapy. And then we will often trial CGM with them, so whether that's flash or one of the other types of continuous glucose monitoring. And we do have some new CGMs available on the market recently, so I've got some slides on that. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And for any patients that are having admissions to hospital, so if they're being admitted for with more than 2 episodes in a year with either DKA or hyperglycemia, they would meet the criteria for continuous glucose monitoring, as well as those we've talked about who, as the same for type 2 diabetes, that require third-party intervention. For women who are trying to conceive, also in type 1 diabetes, for anyone with a learning disability, as we mentioned, this would be type 1 as well as obviously type 2. Any patients that are having hemodialysis that are on insulin treatment, whether they're type 1 or type 2. Any patients with diabetes that have cystic fibrosis on insulin treatment, again, would be considered for continuous glucose monitoring. And anyone that's having any occupational psychosocial circumstances that would warrant a trial of CGM and type 1 diabetes, we do have those patients referred to to see if we can support them with monitoring this way. The tablet press will also talk a little bit about monitoring and CGM for type 2 diabetes, hopefully. And it will look at the different types of CGM that are available on prescription. We have different types of continuous glucose monitoring, some secondary care referrals and prescribed, and some are prescribed on FP10, so in primary care. And we're waiting for this to come out, but we're expecting patients with type 2 diabetes, as I mentioned, in that NICE guidance, who are on insulin and have difficulty with blood glucose testing, so they may be looked after patients that may be having problematic hypoglycemia, but they'll require potentially a prior approval request being submitted. And we'll wait for that tablet press to update us on that. Okay. So I touched on it a little bit. CGM is a sensor that you wear on your arm. There are different types of continuous glucose monitors available on the market. And I've added this slide really because we have continuous glucose monitors, some that we use much more day to day with type 1 patients, and then we have continuous glucose monitors that have extra features to them. So they have the feature to be able to talk to insulin pumps. And so we've tried to split them in CGM into two different types of CGM, if you like. So we often describe them as FP10 CGM. So these are CGM that you can prescribe in primary care, in general practice. So these will be green for our type 1 patients if they've meeting the criteria, and if for those type 2 patients if they've had individual funding requests approved. And then potentially the CGM that's available for them are things like Libra 2. We did have Libra 1 on the market. If anyone's still got any patients on Libra 1, they're about to stop producing it, so we are changing everybody over to Libra 2. So if there's any questions about that, please add that to the text box. More recently, we have something called Dexcom 1, which is another type of continuous glucose monitor, and I'll show you that in a minute. I've got a short video, hopefully, that will just demonstrate that for anyone that hasn't seen it. And then we have something called Gluco RX ADX, which again is another continuous glucose monitor that has recently gone on to prescription, so potentially something we could use. So these are the three CGMs that we use day to day. And for patients who are on insulin pumps, they CGM is coming on leaps and bounds really, and it has the potential to talk to insulin pumps. So the sensors that are a different funding stream, so these come via supply chain, and these really are used in secondary care. So these are speciality CGM, if you like. We have things like Dexcom G6 that will talk currently talk to some of our insulin pumps, and we'll talk to more of the insulin pumps in the future. We have Guardian 4, which is a sensor that talks specifically to a Medtronic insulin pump. We have Libra 3, which has more functionality than the Libra 2. So it's significantly higher cost to it because it has more functions, and that again, this will potentially talk to some insulin pumps hopefully next year. And then we have just come onto the market something called Dexcom G7, which doesn't currently have the ability to talk to insulin pumps, but does have some extra alarm features to it. So these CGM are something that would be referred into consultants, and it's the consultant that will apply for these from ICB. So we're not going to touch upon specialist CGM this afternoon. That's a different talk altogether. But we are going to talk about CGM that's available on FP10, and really think about the benefits of CGM for our patients and what it means as clinicians. So thinking about how we support our patients really and what's available for us. So benefits to patients. So I don't know if anyone's seen CGM as yet. I've got a short video I'll show you if anyone hasn't seen it in a minute, hopefully. And benefits to patients are, so a sensor is worn on the arm and it is monitoring your glucose level constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we have different types of continuous glucose monitor. We have something called Libra, Libra 2, and this requires you to wand yourself with your transmitter or your mobile phone that has an application on it that will recognise the glucose and store those readings. And we have things like Dexcom 1 and the Gluco ADX, which you apply the sensor and this will constantly measure your glucose levels, and it will record the glucose on either a reader, which we can give out to patients, or it again will record your glucose data on your mobile phone device, so patients are able to see it. Also on smartwatches as well, so some patients will have it having their glucose levels coming through to the smartwatch. The continuous glucose monitoring nowadays doesn't require any finger prick testing, so there's no calibration required to it. For any of you that have worked in diabetes for a while, historically when glucose sensors first came onto the market, you had to do a lot of finger prick testing to calibrate them, but you don't need to do that anymore with them. As I mentioned, they're constantly measuring your glucose level. So what they'll do is they'll take a scan reading every 5 minutes and update on your phone every 5 minutes. But it'll also capture that data and record up to 3 months worth of data on the continuous glucose monitoring. It has alarms to it, so you can set your Libra 2, your Dexcom 1 and the Gluco-ADX has both low and high alarms on it. Some of the more expensive CGM have hypo warning alarms, but for our Libras, they have an alarm when your glucose level gets to a certain level, and you can customize what level that is. So it may be 4, or if anyone has any hypo awareness, you might decide to set it a little bit higher. If somebody is frail, if somebody's elderly, again, you may decide to set their glucose alarms at a slightly higher level so that they're getting the alarm before they reach a hypo. And again, these sensors have high alarms to them as well. So if you're unwell, if your glucose level is going above a certain level, and again, you can tailor these to the patient. It will alarm just to prompt them that they may need to do something else. So it may be that they need to, particularly for our type 1s, check for ketones. All of this information, as I said, is stored on the phone, is stored on the reader, but also that data, that information will be uploaded to a platform. So with Libra, we use something called Libra View, and that data can be shared so the patient can see their own data if they log into it, but also you can automatically share that data if you have access to Libra View. So if in your GP surgery you set up a Libra View platform, and it sounds quite challenging, but it's not. The companies are very supportive, and you literally log in, have a list of patients, and you can see their glucose data if you need to log into them. So it's brilliant for remote consultations. It's really good. For patients wearing their sensor day to day, it's waterproof, so you can get in the shower, you can go swimming, and so they're designed to be comfortable, they're designed to be easy to wear, easy to apply. And I have to be honest, patients, the feedback we get from anyone that starts on it is that actually this can be life-changing. It means that you haven't got to monitor your glucose levels, and you can quickly and easily access what your glucose levels are doing. It really is life-changing for some of our patients. The hypo alarms have been the next step. Originally when we had it, the sensor didn't have the hypo alarms, and again it allows our patients to know if their glucose levels are dropping, and they're able to manage it. And so we've had reductions in admissions to hospital, and again from a high glucose point of view as well. So, more than one CGM on the market. So for staff, this can be challenging. So, but for patients, it gives them choice about which continuous glucose monitor they want. So within this area, we predominantly have most of our patients using something called Libra 2, and I'll show you that in a minute. But for some patients, they may have problems with sight, they might have irritation, they might struggle to access that particular sensor on their mobile phone. So having the choice of different continuous glucose monitor allows them to have choice in which one they use. The first one we've got here is the Dexcom 1. I don't know if you can see this. So what you have here is what you can see is the plaster here. That's the sensor. The little grey transmitter is what collects all the data. And you can see here, this is what your patient will be able to see on their mobile phone device. So they'll be able to see their glucose level. That's the little bubble with the numbering at the top, and they have directional arrows on them. So as well as telling you what your glucose level is doing at that particular point. It also tells you if your glucose level is steady, or if your glucose level, if the arrows are pointing down, your glucose level is falling, or if your glucose level is going up, the arrow will point up, which is really useful for patients who might be going off to bed and they're unsure if they need to have a snack before they go to bed, if their glucose levels are the lower end of target. They might look at where their directional arrow is pointing. That might help them to decide what they need to do about it. You can see on the picture as well, there's a graph. So what they can also see is what's happened to their glucose levels in the last up to 24 hours on this chart here. So if it's dipping below the red line, it may be that they've had a low reading overnight, and that might help them to make decisions about the insulin dose they're taking. And so it's about giving them more information than just having a finger prick glucose test once, twice, 3, 4 times a day. So it's much more information that they can make more decisions about. So that's the Dexcom 1. And so Dexcom 1's been available on prescription since August. And so for our patients with type 1 diabetes, we've had a few people that have been on Libra that might have had some site irritation or struggling to monitor with the Libra, and so we've changed a few people over. So you may have seen Dexcom 1 out and about in the community. If anyone hasn't ever seen what they look like, we've added this short video. I'm just going to play it just so you can see how patients apply a sensor. So bear with me, I'm just going to see if I can share this with you. It's a couple of minutes long. Okay, so I hope that was useful. Can everyone see the slideshow still?
Yeah, it's back on.
Lovely, thank you very much. So as I mentioned, we have different continuous glucose monitors on the market. Dexcom is one of the potential choices if you're looking at the different glucose monitors available, but we also have Libra 2. So Libra 2 is slightly different to Dexcom. Libra 2 has a sensor, but the transmitter is built into the sensor. Dexcom 1 is a sensor that you wear for 10 days. and so patients would need 3 sensors per month, and the transmitter you change every 12 weeks. With Libra 2, they are 14-day wear sensors, and you would need 2 sensors per month. And you can monitor either with a mobile phone device if you're able to download the app onto the patient's mobile phone, or they are able to have a reader, as you can see in the picture here. So Libra provide readers for their patients as well. They do have a ketone port on the reader, but we don't recommend using the ketone strips with the reader. We always follow our local guidance on ketone monitoring, and so we use whichever the recommended ketone strips currently. And if anyone wants any more information, we can provide that in the chat feature. And we also have Gluco ADX. So I think predominantly for patients in Northamptonshire, the vast majority are on Libra. And if anyone's got patients on Libra 1 sensors, they do need, as I mentioned, changing over to Libra 2. Dexcom 1 is relatively new to the market, and we have a few patients on Dexcom 1. But also Gluco ADX is recently also providing a FP10 CGM sensor that can be prescribable. I don't think I've currently got any patients using this at the minute, but you may see patients in the future using this continuous glucose monitor. So we touched upon continuous glucose monitor from a patient's perspective. So as I mentioned, patients have found it to be, those type 1 patients that have been using it that have met criteria, have found it to be life-changing at times. But we do know also that there has to be some benefits to using technology with our patients. So when we're thinking about the benefits to patients, we also like to think about the benefits to clinicians. And so there are, and you can find this information out if you need to, and there's some links at the end that will take you through to some of the information that's available and some of the outcomes for, there's been some RCTs, so randomised controlled trials looking at the benefits to clinicians. And so we know for patients that are using intensive insulin therapy, they may benefit from moving away from the capillary testing, which is why we are using it with our type 1 patients. And thinking about moving away from capillary testing to moving towards that continuous glucose monitoring. Looking at ensuring that it's having a positive impact for our patients. What we're looking to see is it having a positive impact on that HbA1c. So this is one of the sort of metrics that we look at. So if we have patients with high HbA1c, we need to support them to make sure that they're getting the most from their continuous monitor, and that it's helping them to achieve or work towards those goals of achieving those HbA1c targets. For patients that are having hyperglycemia, and we're looking at using continuous glucose monitoring with them, we're looking to see that those hyperglycemia events are being reduced. And actually, the things like the Libra platform has a way in which you can look and you can pull reports to see, are you having patients that are having frequent episodes of hyperglycemia. We haven't included this in this presentation, but that is something that we do look at and that we can use, and it is really useful as a clinician when you're looking at your patients and you're looking at the data that's coming through for them. And we have reports of sort of patient satisfaction and staff satisfaction. So when you're thinking about that consultation with your patient, if you're able to access their glucose data, if you're able to share that, it can have a positive impact on that consultation with that patient. So rather than them bringing in their diary with some glucose monitoring, and it is limited data often with that capillary testing, having the ability to access shared data, and all 3 of these continuous glucose monitors have that ability where you can share the data if patients are happy to share their data with the clinician, and we with the companies would be able to set you up with access to we call it Libra View, which platform, and you can hold a clinic list of patients that are using Libra. And if your patient is coming into clinic, you can, if they've shared their data with you, you can access their data. So you can have an effective consultation. You can have a remote consultation with them because you're able to see their data without them having to come into clinic. The platforms that they offer, as I mentioned, Libra have Libra View, Dexcom has a platform called Clarity, and GlucoDX has a platform as well. And the platforms will offer reports looking at, they'll give you diary reviews, but they'll also give you information, percentage of glucose which is within a recommended range. This slide shows the introductory reports that are available with one of the platforms. This is Libra View. Apologies again because it's quite a small image, but if you can see, this is what we call an AHP report, and it's looking at the glucose statistics and their targets. So on the left-hand side, it gives a recommendation about glucose targets, and it will give recommendations for type 1, type 2, for frail and elderly, and obviously for pregnancy, because the targets will be different for these different populations. On the right-hand side, because the continuous glucose monitor is capturing their glucose for potentially 24 hours a day if they're scanning and if they're wearing their sensor and they're getting the most from their sensor.
Lauren, sorry, can I butt in? Sorry, Lauren, the slides aren't moving.
Oh, what slide are you on?
I've just got some in the chat box. People are saying the slides aren't moving.
Okay, so the current slide is a Libra View, which is looking at the AGP reports.
Can anyone see
yeah.
that?
I can see the slides moving, but
Yes, I can see the slides moving.
Sorry, Lauren.
Apologies.
Yeah, it's just that what they were saying in the chat. Can we get a copy of these to send out afterwards anyway, just in case?
Yeah, I'll try and slow down. Apologies, because sometimes there is a lag, depending on your device. So somebody said that slide 15 is stuck. Just going to scroll back and then scroll. So we're currently on slide 18. I can't, and apologies, I can't see the chat function while I'm in presenter mode to see where we are.
No worries, I can tell you about the chat. I think we're at slide 18 on there. People are saying they can move it along themselves.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So, yeah, so apologies about that. Yeah, so this is some of the information that you should, as clinicians, anyone that's just gone onto this slide, this is some of the information that as clinicians you should be able to see. If you have a patient that's on a continuous glucose monitor, then their information is stored on their device, and it's stored, they need to set up an account for themselves with the, this one is a Libra account. But they can then share their information with you as the clinician. So I have Libra View set up in our clinic, and I'm going to ask Lindsay to tell me, do you know how many people we've got on our Libra View? The last time I looked, I think it was about 1,100 people. I have to be honest, I don't look at their data unless I'm running some reports or unless I have a consultation with the patient, and then prior to them coming into clinic, I will have a look at their glucose levels. And because the information is really useful for that consultation, on the report you can see here, I suspect you can't see it because the print's quite small, but it will give you a predicted GMI, which is a prediction of what their HbA, it's a reflection of what their HbA1c potentially will look like. So if I've had a patient that's come into clinic and I said their HbA1c taken 4 or 5 months ago, and I can access their Libra data, and this will give me current information. So if they're wearing a sensor and the data is recent data, I'm able to look at it and it will predict, as long as there's at least 14 days worth of data, it will predict what their GMI is, which is a reflection of what their HbA1c is. And they're reasonably accurate, I have to say. So they're a useful tool. And the thing that's really useful about them, as well as the diary, and you can see in the middle of this profile, this collects all of their glucose readings for the last 14 days. And the dark line in the middle, if you can see like the dark blue line, is what's happening the vast majority of the time. So this is over 24 hours. We've got midnight until midnight. And the glucose levels in the middle are what's happening predominantly. And then the next, this slightly lighter blue line is what's happening some of the time. And then this very lighter blue sort of shaded area is what's happening at odd times, really, so happening infrequently. So it might be they've had a high reading at certain points of the day, and it will capture that data for you as well. It does give you a daily glucose profile, so you are able to go in and look at the different days of the week with them. So this is a 14-day view, and when you look at it on the site, you can see it in much more detail. I have their actual numbers across the bottom of what their glucose levels have been doing. The thing I like to share with them that I like to look at is what their time in range is doing. And this slide here is talking about time in range. So currently, when we're seeing patients in clinic, we talk to them about their HbA1c, so what's happening with their glucose levels over 3 months. And HbA1c is still our gold standard of tool for thinking about how well somebody's glucose levels are controlled. But it does average out very high readings and very low readings. And so having the ability to look at what's happening to that glucose for a full 14 days is really useful. And so what the CGMs are able to produce is something called their time in range. And so a time in range picks up all of that glucose data for those 24 hours a day for those 14 days, and it will put it into blocks of time. So it will capture the percentage of time somebody is below target. It'll capture the amount of time that their glucose is within target. And typically outside of pregnancy, this will be anything from 3.9 to 10. That's the default. That doesn't mean that you're asking your patients to keep their glucose levels between this target. It is very individualised. It also capture data, and it will put it into percentage for patients that have a glucose of above 10. And it'll also capture data of glucose that are running significantly higher, so glucose that's above 14 will capture that data. So this is really useful. So if the patient comes into clinic, you're able to talk to them about the time they're spending in target, so thinking about what's working well for them, but also you're able to talk to them if they're having episodes of hyperglycemia. And so there is different recommendations about what would be considered to be a good time in range, what's an acceptable amount of time to be below target. Not that it should be, but we do know it happens from time to time. I'm also thinking about talking to them about when their glucose levels are running high, and is there anything we can do to support them to squeeze those very high readings down, so we're trying to get their glucose levels in that target range. And also if they're having lots of low readings, you can look at this and then you can go back and have a look at the daily logs to see, is there any particular times of the day that it's happening? Is it always at night time? Is it always after their evening meal? And then you can support them to make some decisions about the insulin dosing that they're currently doing. This is national recommendations. So this is used up and down the country when we're thinking about time in range targets. And there are different targets. I don't know if you can see here. So we have different targets if somebody is at higher risk. So if they have, so depending on their frailty score, compared to somebody that is our type 1 population, our type 2 population. Our pregnancy has a different time in range as well, significantly different. And so we do have this, and they are often in the guides that we give to patients. They can see it, but also we can see it. So it's really quite useful to share when you have a consultation. If I've seen a patient 6 months ago and I'm seeing them in clinic again today, I tend to write down what their time range has been, so we can look to see how things have changed. So not only their HbA1c, but we can look to see if they were having lots of hypos, has this time decreased, or if they're having lots of high readings, have the changes that they've made had a positive impact. So it's just another tool really to sort of have a discussion about those, about their glucose levels. So we do appreciate that as technology moves along, it offers our patients much more accessibility. So the technology is designed to support them in managing their diabetes, in improving their diabetes control, reducing the risk of hypos, reducing the risk of DKA. And we are seeing more and more technology being available to patients, as we talked about at the beginning of the session. But it is important that we're able to support our patients, and if they're coming into clinic, that we know how this technology works, but also that we're able to support them in looking at that information with them. CGM will become more commonplace as the years go by, I suspect, and so it's really important to have an understanding of what CGM is available, what is appropriate prescribing, so thinking about our local guidance, our national guidance. And so there is education available for secondary care staff, for primary care staff. So, and we have some really nice work done by Leicestershire Diabetes, and it's called the Eden Diabetes, and it's an e-learning resource. And it looks at, they provide lots of different resources for learning, but they do provide a module, an e-learning module on continuous glucose monitoring. So the recommendation is for any staff supporting patients with diabetes in primary care, we'd really like you to have a look at this education. It's available and it's specifically tailored to staff that are working in primary care, and there are links to it. It is free. You would need to register and complete the online learning, and the link is through it here. We will add this to the tablet press also once it's been drafted and it's available to send out. There are other HCP resources available as well, so we've added some links here. This was has been forwarded to us, so there's some really nice links. So there's some information that you can access on the NICE guidance for diabetes, type 1, type 2, and there are links for it here. As I mentioned, Dexcom is one of the CGM that's available, and they have links for staff training, and it can be found on their website. They also have links for patients, so patients are able to go on and do training themselves. Libra have Libra Academy also, which has links to training, and is some of the training for different sites is CPD accredited, so we do recommend that you go on and complete it. And GluCo ADX also has information for healthcare professionals about CGM and how to use it, so there's lots of videos, lots of links on how to apply the sensors, troubleshooting, latest guidance, and so they're really useful sites to have a look at. GluCo is one of the platforms that can link this information, but they also provide modules on insulin pumps. There's a module on Libra, there's modules on pregnancy, so a really useful resource. And again, this is CPD accredited, so worth looking at and completing modules. And you can see here there's some links for other patient information, pharmacy link page there as well. Again, this is just the highlight. So Eden has been developed for primary care, and it's that education pack. So this is what we're recommending, and there's a link for it here. If anyone would like these slides, we can send it to you, and the link is live, so you can click on it and it will take you to these. We have added, I've added trend on here as well. But for anyone that hasn't looked at the trend, again, this has been produced by nurses in Leicestershire, and they produce resources for healthcare professionals on all types of diabetes advice and education, whether it's on DKA, hypoglycemia, diabetes and menopause, diabetes and thinking about looking renal function. So they provide lots and lots of information. They also provide lots of information for patients as well. And so this is often the resources that I'll print that I'll give to patients coming into clinic, and I know Lindsay does as well. So there's information on DVL and DVLA and driving, information on hyperglycemia and sick-day rules type 1, type 2. So lots and lots of really lovely resources for patients as well. And of course, as I mentioned, the different CGM companies have lots and lots of patient resources as well. So there is, we have Freestyle Academy, and we do recommend patients to complete these. For patients going on to continuous glucose monitoring at the minute, they do need to complete some education, some training, and so that's really important. So we have Libra webinars where we initiate Libra, and we run these every month. But with more CGM available on the market, we do also know that we need to be directing some of the patients to ensure that they are also doing this learning as well, so giving them sort of options. But it is something that we do need to do if we're starting patients on continuous glucose monitoring. And I've been talking for such a long time now, I am going to stop. And I'm going to see if there's any questions in the chat feature, and I might get Lindsay to come back to me and see if there was anything. I know we've been answering some questions. Thank you very much, Anne. I can see you've been answering some questions now also. Let me stop sharing.
The majority of the questions have been answered on the as we've gone along, to be honest with you, Lauren. Somebody's got their hand up though. I can see a hand.
That's
Rebecca. My hand. Hello. Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I had two questions. With the Dexcom One, I've had quite a few patients that have been irritated by the Libre sensors. With the Dexcom One, do we need to refer to secondary care to be started, or is that because it's an FP10 you can start it?
So I'll stop sharing, Lindsay, first of all. Oh, and you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah. If you want, I can take this one.
Yes.
So basically, the sensors are being reclassified. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. If somebody, yeah, thank you, that's better. So basically, the sensors have been reclassified to green specialist recommendation, which means they can be started in primary care for the patients with type 1 diabetes. For patients with type 2 diabetes, there's still a requirement for prior approval. So therefore, if you know, the patients with type 2 are likely to have already been referred in to the system. But if in your practice you've got enough expertise, if you've got somebody who is trained up as a DSN, and they're able to provide the patient education on how to use the system and how to monitor, how to use the information that comes out of it, then it would be acceptable to start in primary care. I think the main point with these systems is they're very expensive. It's about £800 a year per patient. But as Lauren has said, the potential, if they're used properly, the information that comes out is so very powerful. But I think it's really important that we do use the information to the maximum, because the cost pressure in the system from them is huge. I mean, depending on which way you add it up, somewhere between £2 and £9 million just for Northamptonshire. So we've got to be sure that we're getting good value and that patients are properly educated on how to get the most out of them. Does that help, Lauren? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's lovely. And can I ask, because I'm not sure that I particularly covered it, so for patients that are using continuous glucose monitor, we still need to provide potentially some glucometer strips, don't we? But we won't need as many.
Yeah. So these patients are able to use these systems to make decisions about their insulin. So if they're carb counting, if they're varying their insulin dose, the results from the CGM system can be used to make those treatment decisions. However, if the patient experiences symptoms that don't match with what their CGM system is telling them, then the advice is that they should do, finger prick test. They should need far fewer finger prick tests. So what we're saying is that patients still need to have a meter, they still need to have a box of strips, but probably only one box of strips a month, maybe less than that. So if they're have been testing, 6-8 times a day, then the number on repeat needs to be reduced to just one box of strips as they need it and not on regular repeat. But they should still be available to them because they will need to check if their symptoms don't match what the CGM system is saying. Is that okay?
That's lovely, thank you. And I think I touched on it there. So some of the readers that patients may have had for Libra, they have ports for them for ketone testing. I think I mentioned it earlier, but we don't always recommend the ketone strips that would go into these, do we, Anne? I think.
Yeah, so the ketone strips that go into the port are far more expensive than the GlucoRx ketone strips, which are the ones that we would recommend. So again, it's about getting good value for the local healthcare system.
The education is really important for staff and for patients. So I didn't cover it here, but things like continuous glucose monitoring, patients can use for monitoring their glucose before they drive. So from a DVLA perspective, for any patients that have the LGV, HGV licenses, they cannot currently use sensor data prior to driving, so it's not accepted for that. But for your standard car licenses, you're able to use the sensor data prior to driving. And there's guidance around when to test glucose levels. You need to test within 2 hours of driving, so scan data is acceptable for that. And they mustn't scan while they're driving, so they must stop and pull over, and because we've had a few issues with that recently. If they're checking their glucose data, they're obviously not using their mobile phone while they're driving, but they do need to check every couple of hours. And so the learning is really important, not from just the perspective of how to apply a sensor, but also knowing the guidance around sensor monitoring and things like TPNA and hyperglycemia and hyperglycemia. It's important to do for learning.
Just expanding from that as well, it's just really important to make sure your patients are aware that we're not Big Brother. You're not going to be watching that data for them. It's their responsibility to manage their diabetes and to get that information. And if they have any concerns, to contact medical professional if they're concerned about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tessa, I don't know if we answered your question about the transmitters. So Dexcom One, as I mentioned, the Libra didn't have any transmitters. It's built in, so on prescription they'll get 2 transmitters a month, so it lasts for the 14 days. And we do only ever prescribe the two sensors per month. With Dexcom, they last 10 days, so they'll need 3 sensors. And the transmitter isn't on prescription. It's something that they can source from their pharmacy. What we're currently doing for anyone, because it's relatively new, is we're having some starter packs from the company. So within that starter pack, there's a transmitter and 1 sensor. And so we initiate them on this. And then, Anne, you'll correct me, and Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong. When they get towards the 12 weeks, which is how long the Dexcom One transmitter lasts for, they'll need to contact their pharmacy to look at supplying them. So they're not on prescription, but it is the pharmacy that will be able to supply the transmitters for them.
Yeah, that's
Lauren.
correct.
Lauren, can I just check that they are definitely in all the pharmacies? Because I've had a couple of patients. Obviously, I know what I'm doing with it, but I've had a couple of patients that have come in instead of their transmitters. So what worries me here is that people go over onto the Dexcom One, which is fine because even it's new to me as well, but then they can't get the transmitter. It's just obviously what I've done is I've left prescribing for their strips up for the first 3 months, and then I pop it down. They're not using them, but it's just in case they need to go back. because of getting the transmitter.
Yes, so I'm going to apologise. So when so they've only been out since August, so not long, and so it does take a little while for us to get over the teething problems typically. So so what they'll get on prescription is the 3 sensors, but the transmitter, you're absolutely right. I wrote some prescriptions for patients to start it, and I didn't have the transmitter. And we do know that they were struggling to get them initially. So what we're doing is we're giving them, if they're brand new to it, we're giving them a starter pack. So in the starter pack is 1 sensor and the transmitter. And I can see you've got your hands up. Do you know anything different from a pharmacy point of view?
No, it's fine. But just to let you know that we have been in touch with the rep, and there will be some starter packs going out to GP practices as well. I think it's just, you know, we need to it's new to the pharmacists as well, so they need to be in the loop of having these things ordered in so that they're available for patients. I think, you know, over the next month or so, as people get used to it, it will get easier.
I suspect they'll need to go to their pharmacy where they get their sensors from, also to get the transmitter.
Yep. That is the plan in the long term. Yeah.
Anne, can I just ask one quick question? Sorry, because it might be on behalf of all the practices here, because obviously we took a lot of patients down from Ozempic. It looks to me, and does everybody have the same feeling, that patients are starting to be able to get it again? Because it feels to me as if we've not had any problems for the last sort of 10 days or so, and that people are starting to get it, because we've got a whole list where we need to put them back up. But I just want to make sure that seems the same across the board, and I can put them back up to 1 milligrams. And I know this isn't the chat, but it's important for us.
Right.
No, absolutely. So this is it's a really acceptable time to move on to this. And do you want to answer it, or do you want me to answer it?
I must admit, I don't know off the top of my head that it's fully back in stock. I can make some inquiries and see if I can find out. Apparently, the reason it all went out of stock is because it was on TikTok that you could use it to lose weight, and
And so, from my understanding is that so for patients that are on Ozempic or semaglutide, then if they were on it, there was enough to keep them going. They shouldn't have to necessarily stopped it. But anyone that was new to GLP-1, we weren't initiating them on it for the time being. And as far as I know, we're okay to do that now. It was until the end of October, but I think, Anne, if you, I'll let you see if you can confirm that first of all.
I will need to make some inquiries and get back to you if that's okay.
I think it is better, because I certainly think from ours, we've had patients now coming back saying they want to go back up. So I just wanted to check it wasn't just an interim couple of weeks and then we're going to go back to where we were, but that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, so for Ozempic it is, for Trulicity it's not. We've been told it'll be into the new year. So for any patients that have got anyone on dulaglutide or Trulicity, it's as its other name, there's still stock issues, is my understanding of this. And we've been told not to initiate any new patients on Trulicity until after January. And again, they'll update it in January. So yeah. So the advice is, if you are having stock issues, you could, if anyone's waiting to go on it and they're new to GLP-1, so we'll find out about the Ozempic, that might be an option, but you do have things, the choice of using things like the oral Rybelsus. You have a choice of using things like Victoza, we know is still in stock. And we do have some of the other GLP-1s, although remember we are trying to use the GLP-1 that has that cardiovascular data to it. That's the only thing I would say. So yeah. But if anyone does have any queries or questions, I did have the email address for the diabetes team. You can email us. Otherwise, it's keeping our MIMS. They will send out updates on stock issues for the different drugs, or the companies themselves should be able to give you some info if you're needing to find out something and we haven't got back to you. Yeah. But yeah. And there's more GLP-1s coming, so so watch this space, but yeah.
That's great, and thank you so much for that. That was brilliant, Lauren, and everybody else that's chipped in along the way. And has anybody else got any further questions just before we move on to the next session and let these guys go?
Can I, Melanie, can I just ask one thing? For anyone that is using continuous glucose monitor, or for any staff who will be using it in clinic, if we're keen to look at supporting you to set up Libre View in clinics and the Clarity platform, these are free platforms. This is what we use within our diabetes service and the diabetes centres, and some GP surgeries already have this, but we know a few probably need setting up on this so that when patients come in you can see their data. It sounds quite challenging to set up, but actually the company will set it up for us, and it's relatively straightforward. And once you've used it, it's very easy to access. So if you can add, or if you can email us in if you would like setting up on this, we will look at organising that with you. If we're coming into your monthly clinics as a DSM service, which we do for most of you, we can discuss it and set it up then if you would prefer, but please do let us know if add your name and your GP in the chat feature, and we can speak to you about getting it set up. Thank you.
Can I just add a couple of things? There will be a tablet press coming out that's confirming the change in traffic light of these CGMs. And I think the other thing maybe that people need to be aware is, if you're watching TV, you will have seen that these are being very heavily advertised, but they are an expensive technology. So I think we need to be quite aware that patients being started, it needs to be for a sound clinical reason and not because they've seen an ad on the telly. And that they need to have the training and the education to use the information that it's gathering. I think that's really important.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Anne. I've took down lots of email addresses as well. So if you have missed anything, I'll send you an email with everybody's details in. That's great. Thank you so much for the session.
Fabulous. Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Okay, everyone. We've just got our final session for this afternoon. If you can hang on, that will be wonderful. I think our presenter was here nice and early, so we'll probably start as soon as we can get them set up. So Darcy, if you want to share your screen. There you are. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. So I'm going to hand you over. So we have Darcy Robinson-Barr coming to talk to us about the diabetic foot, how to monitor it and how to act. Darcy, I will keep an eye on the chat box. I don't know how you want to work it, if you want to sort of answer questions at the very end, or if you want to kind of do it in between.
If we could save all the questions to the end, that would be really helpful.
Yeah,
just in case anyone needs to dive off, and then people can either ask me at the end of the session, or they can feel free to email me.
Perfect, lovely. I'll keep an eye on that for you then.
Thank you. Everyone still see that, just to make sure if I pop it into presentation mode, everyone's still happy. Fantastic, lovely. So hi everyone, thank you for having me. My name's Darcy. I'm the clinical link podiatrist and educator for Northamptonshire MDT. I'm the link between the community and primary care services to educate on the diabetic foot. So on completion of this session, you should have working knowledge of foot problems in diabetes and the risk that it puts on the diabetic foot. You will also have the skills and the recognition to recognise the early signs of diabetic foot red flags, and when seen, how to refer these patients into our service. We will also provide information on how to make non-urgent and urgent referrals into our service.
Darcy, it's not particularly big, the screen. I know everybody can see it, but we can see your
You can see
speech
the
at side
presentation.
as well.
Okay, let me have a look.
Yeah, it looks to me like you're sharing the because when you do presentation in PowerPoint, it'll come up with two. I think you're sharing the wrong screen.
Okay, let me have a look.
So
Screen. No, it's not that one.
yeah, if you look at which screen you're actually sharing on, so turn off share for now.
Okay. Translation. And then
No, not that one. The actual
one.
in Teams, that one.
That
Then go back into share.
Stop
Click on the
sharing.
share button
Lovely.
and then find the window that you're looking for.
Is it that one? Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
Yes.
And then yeah, if you just put that on presenter view, that's it. Perfect.
Brilliant. And then if I pop that there, if I pop that in presenter view again, is that gonna show on the slides?
It might do. I don't know. Craig's the genius.
Okie doke. Escape that. I'm in that at all. No. Is everyone happy for me to have it as little, or would everyone rather I have it as a larger screen?
I mean, I can see it fine there, but if people want to just let us know if it's, oh, somebody's saying larger, please.
Okay. What I can do is, sorry for the technical difficulties, what I'll do is if I share it.
I think somebody asked about slides. Are you happy to share slides, Darcy, afterwards?
Yes. Yeah, that's not a problem.
That's fine.
If I share the slides, is everyone happy for me to use the smaller ones just for the time being? Just I'm conscious of time. I don't want to keep any. Is that lovely? Thank you. So there are two main components that lead to the diabetic foot to be a greater risk than the non-diabetic foot. Firstly, there's neuropathy, which is an overreaching term for nerve damage. Secondly, there is peripheral arterial disease, which is a reduction in the blood flow to the leg and or the foot, caused usually by either hardening or blockages within the arteries that build up over time. Neuropathy is very common in the diabetic foot, with between 60 and 70% of all of our patients with diabetes developing some form of neuropathy in their lifetime. Once signs of neuropathy are presented, generally they are not reversible, although some of the symptoms like burning, pins and needles, electric shock sensations, those type of symptoms can be treated with medications to alleviate the symptoms, but physical damage remains. It's worth mentioning that statistics take into account all diabetic patients from low risk to active patients. If we look closely at risk rating brackets, then I wouldn't be wrong in saying that all of our active ulcer patients will have neuropathy in some form. Most of our active or in remission patients, most of our in remission or high risk patients will have some form of neuropathy, and the majority of moderate risk patients will have a form of neuropathy too. The second factor is peripheral arterial disease, which can be seen in 20 to 35% of all diabetic patients. Potentially, this is reversible with interventions such as angioplasties, bypasses, and stents, but often this has a limited lifespan of effectiveness before failing. Some patients will develop both of these and are classed as neuroischemic patients, and they have the highest level of diabetic foot risk for consequences such as reoccurring ulcerations, infections, and amputations. Neuropathy can manifest in the way it affects the diabetic foot in three main ways. Firstly, there's protective sensation loss. This doesn't mean that the patient cannot feel anything. It just means that the signals sent from the foot to the brain are distorted, can be muddled, and they're not always accurate. In more severe cases, the sensation to the foot can disappear completely. This puts the foot at risk from trauma, wounds, blistering, callus, and cuts that, if go unnoticed, as the level of pain is reduced or absent. This puts the foot at greater risk of infection from these wounds as they go untreated for longer. Secondly, neuropathy affects the motor nerves in the foot. Over time, these can cause deformity to the foot, which form atrophy. This causes characteristics of high arch profile, high instep, and retracted digits, as seen on the photo in the left. In the neuropathic foot, this means that it's difficult for patients to find shoes that fit, and subsequently, with the loss of sensation, patients tend to choose footwear that is too tight and can cause abrasions and blisters. The deformity can also place areas of high pressure to regions of the foot that are not designed to cope with the level of force, usually the heels of the foot, the balls of the foot, so your MTPJs, and the tips of your toes, so the apices. These places of the foot, are at much higher, greater risk of trauma and damage from abrasion and pressure. Thirdly, the autonomic nervous system can be affected by neuropathy. These are things that we cannot control, like breathing. How this presents in the foot is usually dry anhydrotic skin with deep cracks to the edges of the foot and areas of great pressure. This is caused by changes to the autonomic system, which prevents the sweat glands from working properly to keep the foot hydrated. This over time can cause cracks and splits in the foot, which is an entry route for bacteria and can put the foot at higher risk of ulceration. Although cracks and splits seem superficial, they pose a real problem for us. NICE guidelines show that between 14 and 25% of diabetic patients will have a foot ulcer at some point in their life. Of those unlucky percentage, 50% will die within 5 years of developing a foot ulcer, usually through holistic or metabolic health deterioration. Diabetes is the most common cause of non-traumatic limb amputation. 80% of all amputations in people with diabetes are caused by diabetic foot ulcerations. After the first amputation, people with diabetes are twice as likely to have a subsequent amputation to those without diabetes. Mortality rates after diabetic foot alterations and amputations are high. NICE guidelines state up to about 70% of patients are predicted to die within 5 years of having their first amputation. The high mortality rates are believed to be associated with cardiovascular disease, which is why there's a high emphasis on the importance of good glycemic control, good diabetic control, and cardiovascular risk management following the first amputation. Prevention of deterioration is therefore key to reducing these numbers of amputations and then death. A major factor is in reducing delays in referral to our specialist service. So the next few slides will explore the early signs of foot deterioration and red flags to be aware of, and provide you with knowledge on how to detect the need for urgent acute foot referrals. A diabetic foot ulcer is essentially a localized injury or change in colour or tissue viability to the skin or underlying tissue. To be classed as a diabetic foot ulcer, this must be located below the ankle. On the ankle or the leg is much less likely to be diabetic in cause, and should be referred to a tissue viability team rather than a foot team. However, if you have a wound or an ulcer below the ankle in a diabetic patient, regardless of whether it's infected or not, this is then an urgent acute referral to our service. If this is not referred within 24 hours, this is where my job kicks in. A day text would be completed by one of the diabetic foot specialists who treat active ulcerations. The reason for day text is we follow NICE guidelines and local pathways to ensure that patients are seen within a recommended time basis. We also have key performance indicators to follow. If this has been missed, we need to look closely at why it's been missed, as it could subsequently cause someone to lose a leg, develop sepsis, etc. Please don't think I'm having a go. It's our job to ensure pathways are met, ensure that people are seeing the right professionals at the right time, and this is why the training is so important. Preulcerative lesions are essentially ulcers waiting to happen. They're usually caused by trauma, friction, or pressure, and are often still to an overlying in an area of overlying callus. These are often seen in our neuropathic patients. These are usually in high-pressured areas such as the ball of the foot, the heel, or tips of the toes. The tissue is generally discoloured, so you may see dark brown, red, dark yellow colours, which are caused by bleeding beneath the skin in deep tissue. This can be caused by prolonged and continued pressure. When debrided or taken away, the devitalised tissue, an ulcer, is often revealed, but this is the early stages, and as such, if a patient is referred at this stage, their prognosis for healing without the need for hospitalisation or amputation is much better. For this reason, preulcerative wounds are always urgent referrals to our service. Any sign or suspicion of puncture wound in a diabetic foot needs to be classed as a red flag or an urgent referral to the foot team. These type of wounds have a high potential for infection risk due to the non-sterile nature of the foreign body and the depth of delivery into the tissues. They often go unnoticed by the patient, especially in neuropathic patients. As an example, I had a chat with my manager in the week, and she told me the story. A gentleman was late to his appointment because he couldn't find his house keys, so he had to wake up his wife to use her house keys. He got to the appointment, bless him, and had the keys with him, but not in a traditional sense. They were in his shoes. It's not uncommon for our patients to be that completely neuropathic. So not only would he not be able to feel the sharpness of the shoes against his skin, forcing his foot into his shoe, which wasn't that accommodating anyway, to have that extra space taken by the keys is just a really good example of how our patients are so neuropathic, and how factors, foreign bodies, can go for weeks, months without being unnoticed. Critical or acute limb ischemia is fairly rare, but when presented can have devastating consequences, so it's important for you to be able to spot or be able to suspect the presence of this. There are 6 main presentations of critical limb ischemia. They are pain, pallor, pulselessness, perishingly cold, paresthesia, and paralysis. Pain is associated with the reduction of blood flow to the furthest points from the heart, and gradually increases with severity as the ischemia worsens. In the early stages, patients might report they have cramp in their calf when walking a long or a short distance, or discomfort can be felt in the anterior aspect of the leg or the dorsum of the foot. Pallor. Due to the lack of blood flow, the skin on the affected limb becomes pale, blue, a red wine twinge or mottled colours can be seen. Paresthesia. Changes in sensation that cause symptoms like prickling, pins and needles, numbness, etc. can be seen as early signs of nerve dysfunction secondary to ischemia. With our patients, this often goes hand in hand with neuropathy caused by diabetes, so an ABPI or further neurological investigation can be used to carry out and help diagnosis. paralysis, inability to move the affected limb due to major loss of sensory or motor function. Again, this goes really hand in hand with neuropathy. Perishingly cold, limbs affected will be cold to touch as the limb loses its ability to self-regulate the temperature and will become the same temperature as its surroundings. Pulselessness. Acute limb ischemia typically manifests with severely reduced pulses in one or both feet and legs. For critical ischemia to be seen, the patient needs to be displaying at least 5 of the 6 Ps, which is why it's so uncommon. If the patient is positive to at least 5 of the 6 P tests, then you should be suspicious of critical limb ischemia. The patient should immediately be blue lighted to Northampton General. This is where all the vascular interventions for the county are carried out, and patients must be seen there. They can either attend via the vascular hot desk or the SDEC, which can be arranged by the vascular consultant on call, a GP, or you can send them directly to Northampton General A&E. We ask that you must also complete an urgent referral to the foot team, as we have a dedicated ward podiatrist at Northampton General who will be a specialist diabetes podiatrist, becomes part of the MDT care that the patient receives while they're in hospital. Necrosis and gangrene is often a late-stage consequence of critical limb ischemia, manifesting in tissue death and non-viability due to peripheral arterial disease end stage. This can present as different stages, in some cases as a stable gangrene or necrosis, which community nurses may be able to monitor and redress on a regular basis with a view for the digits to auto-amputate as part of the expected process. Like the picture on the left, which shows healthy tissue below clear, demarked dead tissue at the toes. These cases do not need to be referred back to the foot team at each visit. However, if the gangrenous area deteriorates, as in the middle and the right-hand pictures, then as per critical limb ischemia guidance, these patients must be referred to Northampton General, either to the vascular hot desk, the SDEC, or Northampton General A&E urgently, as the spreading necrosis, especially when wet in nature, is life-threatening and often limb-threatening and life-threatening from sepsis. Once again, an urgent red flag referral must also be completed to the foot team so that the ward staff attending as part of the MDT for the inpatient are aware. I cannot stress the importance of taking time with critical limb ischemia patients. There's a lot of research into Afro-Caribbean backgrounds, and time is key. There's a lot of disparity which can be seen between Caucasian and Afro-Caribbean treatment and care with peripheral arterial disease. So taking time to observe full history, taking photos and monitoring closely can help save lives. Any signs of infection or inflammation presenting in the diabetic foot should be referred to the specialist team as an urgent red flag referral. The cardinal signs which you'll be aware of are redness, swelling and heat. In some cases, there may also be pain, but not in all patients, because most of our patients are neuropathic and or ischemic, so they might not present with the usual symptoms of pain associated with infection or inflammation. With this being said, a reduction in blood supply can also reduce erythema seen typically in an infection. It is important that you are watchful regarding the cardinal signs, as although you may not be 100% sure of the actual cause or diagnosis, they need urgent referral for the underlying. The need for urgent referral remains the same regardless of underlying cause, and this will stand you in good stead for the last red flag presentations on the list. Charcot arthropathy is a rare condition that is only affects neuropathic patients. It is usually caused by bony trauma, such as a chip bone, microfractures, hairline fractures, compound fractures, or dislocation. In normal circumstances for a non-diabetic or non-neuropathic patient, the foot would become red hot and swollen as the early signs, but this would also be accompanied by pain and the inability to continue daily activities due to discomfort. The individual would take advice from the GP, the UCC and A&E and have an X-ray, and the damage would be recognised and treated in a timely manner. For our neuropathic patients, and in this case the diabetic foot, the foot would still be red hot and swollen, but the pain mechanisms would not be working, so they are much more likely to continue daily activities following bony damage without presenting to a health professional. The patient will then generally continue normal day-to-day activities on the damaged foot for days, weeks and months without presenting to a health professional. During this time, the inflammatory process becomes chronic and will potentially cause non-union of the original area and damage the surrounding bone. The X-ray in the top right, when compared, shows the osteopenia in the foot over time, especially at the metatarsals and the calcaneum. You will also see the destruction at the midfoot caused by the malunion and non-healing. This then often presents as a visible, grossly deformed foot. This leaves the patient at extremely high risk of pressure ulcers at the deformed areas to the midfoot, but also the excessive pressure to the heels and toes. The foot is often larger than the contralateral foot, and footwear becomes extremely difficult to find. Most of these patients will require bespoke made-to-measure footwear to accommodate the deformity and offload the pressure areas. Often, due to the quality of life issues and recurring ulcerations for the tissue breakdown, these patients unfortunately go on to have below knee amputations. The clear message is that any patient with diabetes presenting with a red hot swollen foot must be referred to as urgent to the specialist foot team, regardless of the suspected diagnosis. As part of the treatment plan, the patient will be assessed by the foot team, and if the Charcot condition is suspected, then a patient will be put in an air cast boot to provide rigid support and protect the bony structures from deformity. An X-ray and/or MRI will be requested. It's worth mentioning that the patient could be in an air cast boot for up to 24 months, sometimes longer, depending on the case. So this is a reminder of the red flag urgent acute diabetic foot problems that you should be mindful of when you're face to face with diabetic patients on a daily basis. In a moment, we'll clarify when and how the patients can be referred to our service. Taking photos, both at first presentation and referral stages and beyond routinely on a regular basis, provides a really useful triage tool and is also invaluable in assessing the patient's healing trajectory. Please continue to do this as part of your planned visits and with your diabetic foot patients. It is always useful to get images that consist of close-up images of wounds, but also distance ones that include the whole foot and the leg so that we have full perspective. Try to use the same angle each time, as this is better for ongoing references of progress. Also, please try to use some measuring tape for wound sizes. On the slide, I've included 3 email addresses. Any urgent photos, please feel free to send those to the urgent diabetic foot teams, either the north or south. And then there's a community email address of the non-urgent photos. I can go there. Supportive heel equipment. Preventative equipment is available for direct order via community nursing teams. Before ordering, consider if the plantar foot or the heel is exposed to a higher unusual pressure, especially in patients that are immobile or bedbound. We have quite a few different bits different footwears that we can recommend. The post-op boots are really good at offloading. We can add different insoles into them, different areas to offload. The heel-up boots are fantastic in bed for patients that are bedbound, wheelchair bound, and they're readily available. NICE guidelines and local NHFT diabetic pathways request that all diabetic foot red flags and urgent acute referrals are referred to the specialist foot team within 1 working day of presentation. The foot team will triage this within one further working day and will offer the patient a face-to-face appointment with an assessment within 24 to 48 working hours of the referral being received. This rule applies even to those patients that you know are already under the specialist foot service. This is because these patients may not have a review appointment with the foot team for another 2 to 3 weeks. However, you may spot that the current wound has deteriorated, or the patient has developed another red flag foot problem. This therefore needs to be referred as urgent once again, so that they can be offered an appointment within 24 to 48 working hours as per the pathway, rather than the patient waiting potentially another 3 weeks to be reviewed by the foot team at their next scheduled appointment. If your patient is diabetic and you have identified red flag urgent foot problems that require referral to the specialist foot team, please confirm this either on the System 1 the district nurse's wound template. This will automatically load the foot referral form, which System 1 will repopulate with the patient's medical details. You will still have to complete some yes or no questions and some free typing questions regarding the reason for the referral. Once completed, follow the System 1 instructions to email the referral directly to System 1. Please ensure that you choose the correct area of the referral, either north or south of the county. The north of the county for patients is areas of Corby, Kettering, Wellingborough, Rushden and Thrapston. Everything else falls under the south. If you're operating on a system other than System 1, please feel free to use our referral form, which you can find on Careflow. Refer via our paper referral scanned onto the system, or email us to one of the above email addresses. Simply refer with an email and a picture. This is only for urgent diabetic foot referrals. Poor referrals will bounce back to yourself and marked as an inappropriate referral. The responsibility then falls back on yourself or the surgery to ensure a proper referral is completed within 24 hours. If the referral is made after 1 working day, a day text will be made and the reason will be for an inappropriate referral. By poor referrals, I mean inappropriate referrals or those that have not had enough information regarding the current foot condition. As an example, please treat the patient for an ongoing foot condition is commonly seen on our referrals, as well as please see the patient for a current foot ulceration. These referrals are not acceptable. Please add as much detail as you can regarding the current foot condition with photos. The diabetic foot specialists who are triaging the patients are doing so in between patients of their own in busy clinics and don't have any time to call patients follow up in between set slots with patients. They need concise details with as much information as possible to act quickly and ensure patients are being seen as quickly as they can. Photos and as much detail are really key. Please ensure that if you are referring one of your patients for an urgent appointment, they may need to travel across this county depending on whether they fall in the north or the south. If they fall, say as an example, if they live in Wellingborough, they may need to travel to Kettering, to the Diabetes Centre or St Mary's or Corby, depending on availability. Just to ensure that they're seen within 24 hours under the NICE guidelines and local pathways. Patients need to be aware that they need to be seen within 24 to 48 hours. It's not uncommon for our patients to report they cannot attend because they weren't made aware of the 24-48 hour window, or because they've already made plans like having lunch with friends or having their hair done. Please discuss the referral with patients and emphasise the importance of attending a 24-48 hour appointment so patients can rearrange plans and be ready to expect such a short turnaround time and more likely to accept available appointments. Our service still allows referrals for routine diabetic patients and non-diabetic patients with relevant foot conditions. There is access criteria for non-diabetic patients, which they must meet in order to qualify for an assessment with our service. The criteria is detailed in the next 2 slides. So we do see a variety of conditions that aren't linked to the diabetic foot, but because of the commission criteria that we have, most of our patients are diabetic in some form or have one of these, but otherwise have one of these conditions. So we see children, we see anyone under the Falls teams, patients that have long-term health conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, any connective tissue disorders, history of homelessness, veterans, and people that are incapable of looking after themselves, like confirmed Alzheimer's or dementia. This is our access criteria. Our service is based on risk. Although these groups can access our service, it does not mean that they'll have treatment for life, as our service relies on following pathways and treating those at risk. So this email address, the patient contact centre, is where all non-urgent referrals need to be sent. No urgent referrals should be sent to this address at any point. If the non-diabetic patient does meet the criteria, or you are referring a patient that requires a foot assessment but does not have any red flags, urgent problems, then the same referral form can be used but must be completed in full and emailed to the above email address and not the urgent diabetic foot email address. So what does this all mean and why is it so important? My predecessor, Andy, I don't know if any of you came across Andy. Andy worked tirelessly to provide education on the diabetic foot and the pathways across the county. From this, he was able to collate data and show why the education of our pathways and the diabetic foot was so important. By delivering foot education sessions, you can see amputation rates decline between 2018 to 2021. There is a notable decline between the years of 2019 to 20 and 2020 to 21. This is because our training is mandatory for every 2 years, meaning everyone must complete this training session across NHFT regardless of their department or profession. These same levels of reduction can be seen over the 4 to 5 year period for the diabetic major lower limb amputation rates for the county, proving that your hard work in providing early referrals to our service truly does make a positive difference to patient outcomes. If you have any queries regarding patient referrals, please don't hesitate to contact the Diabetic and Higher Risk Foot Service on the numbers above. Please note that if a patient is a red flag urgent diabetic foot referral, then they will not be able to be seen at home. We don't carry out home visits at the level of care needed, as care needed is MDT level, where diabetic and vascular consultant input is needed. These patients must be able to attend an in-clinic appointment either on their own with relatives or via EMAS non-emergency ambulance care. This also includes patients that are bedbound and rely on transport via stretcher or hospital bed. If they are not able to attend or refuse to attend, then their care will be passed back to their GP and community services. Please also note, before referring patients, that we are not commissioned to routinely cut nails or care for hard skin or callus treatment. This care will often be carried out for the high-risk patients, but is not a regular service that is guaranteed. This is including diabetic patients who do not meet criteria, who have a low or moderate risk rating. I just want to quickly mention where our service currently is following COVID. Like most professionals, there's a shortage of podiatrists, but podiatrists across the UK in particular, we're at a national shortage. Because of this, we are having to run the service at a slightly different model. So for low risk, moderate risk and high risk patients, they fall under our PIFU model. So these patients call the patient contact centre to book an appointment with any non-urgent needs, and they're seen as and when needed. If they had any red flags or any urgent concerns, they'd call the diabetes centre at Kettering General or the Battle House at Northampton General with any concerns, and they'd be seen within 24 to 48 hours. Any patients who have had active issues in the past, so like ulcers or Charcot's, we would refer to them in-house as PODSI patients. outside of Northamptonshire, they're classed as patients that are in remission, and this is mentioned in literature as well. These patients are seen in specialist PODSI clinics and they're booked in routinely. And then active patients are, of course, seen as a priority. So they would be seen in active clinics across the county. So I've been asked to pop in some ground rules across the county. My predecessor, bless him, had his phone number on all of his slides, and it towards the end of his time with us, it got a bit out of hand. So I've been asked if I could just put my email address on the slides. But with that being said, there are ground rules. I'm happy to reply to emails in to support with management. I am happy to answer emails. Happy to answer emails in regarding the presentation and follow up on training, offer support, and to issue resources. If any DATEX have been completed, I'm happy to discuss those as well via email. So I don't work for the Diabetes and High Risk Foot Service. Although I'm a passionate podiatrist by trade, my role resides under the Diabetes MDT umbrella. So this means that I don't work for the diabetes team myself. I don't work for the Diabetes and High Risk Foot Service myself. So referrals, I don't tend to see those. The urgent referrals are dealt with by the diabetic foot specialists, and then the non-urgent referrals are dealt with by senior community podiatrists. So I can't really, and I won't be. I've been advised not to help with individual cases. Any concerns, the diabetic foot team need to be discussed. They need to be emailed so they can be discussed. As you can appreciate, I have my own caseload. I'm an educator 2 to 3 days a week, and the rest of the week is spent in clinic. So I'm not able to support with individual patients. Any problems at all, just refer straight into the Diabetic and High Risk Foot Service. So thank you for attending this session. Please keep in mind the diabetic foot red flags when visiting your diabetic patients, as early referrals have positive effect on outcomes of patients that develop diabetic foot problems. There is a list of everything, all the referrals that you'd need across the county. And I just quickly want to, if I'm not running over, just quickly talk about neurovascular screenings ever so quickly. So with risk rating, how we test and determine risk ratings in the diabetic foot. So there are 2 sensation tests that we use, the 10-gram monofilament tests, which apply fine pressure to the foot, roughly about 10 grams of pressure. And then we would use the neurosthesiometer as well, which measures vibration perception, which overall gives us a good insight as to how much sensation can be perceived in the diabetic foot. We would then also use a Doppler ultrasound test to measure the dorsalis pedis artery, which is a superficial artery, and the posterior tibial artery, which is deep. Listening to those 2 arteries, it gives us a clear insight of how much blood supply is reaching the foot. There's 3 different pulses that we could listen for. Triphasic is excellent, biphasic is really good. Monophasic, we would be looking at vascular intervention in the community via the GP. In the active, the urgent, the diabetic foot specialist teams, they have a vascular consultant there, so they'd be able to liaise with the vascular consultant to arrange tests or interventions if needed. Excuse me. So we would use a handheld Doppler in clinic. This is what our neurosthesiometer looks like. We just apply it to the tip of the apex of both toes, take 3 measurements, and as long as the vibration perceived is under 25 hertz, that shows that the patient has good vibration perception. And the monofilament that we would use, we test 3 locations on the feet 3 times to give us a score out of 9. That overall gives us a good indication of how much sensation is in the feet. If the patient scores below 7 out of 9, so 6 or lower, they are classed as a neuropathic patient. If 2 out of the 3 sites are missed, that would also lead to indication that they're neuropathic. So from the screenings, we can determine what risk the patient's at. So if there's no changes to either the circulation or the sensation, the patients are low risk and would be with their neurovascular screening would be carried out either by us on a recall every year or via the GP. Moderate would be sensory change or a reduction in circulation with at least one of the following risk factors. So hard skin, changes to the feet, the shape of the foot has changed, or the patient cannot look after the foot themselves. High risk would be sensory loss and or reduction in circulation with 2 or more of the following. The same as moderate, but there's also a history of previous ulceration and amputations, and advanced chronic kidney disease under a consultant or renal dialysis, with vision impairments included on that list as well. So this PowerPoint was used to support a community diabetes support group, but the information is still the same. So home management, this is what we would recommend for patients, that patients use a urea-based cream every day to moisturize their feet. They can either apply a few drops on an old towel and run their feet over the top of them, or they can pop a few blobs onto the top of both feet and then run the feet over each other. You can use brands like Flexitol. They vary in urea from 5% to 25%, depending on where you use them. The importance for urea is urea's I can never say it, it's a humaculant. So it moisturizes the skin beautifully, but then it stops the skin from drawing that moisture into other parts of the body. So in the summer, if it gets really hot, naturally all the moisture gets sucked out of our bodies, and skin can crack because of it. Skin can look really dry. With urea, it's like a double base, so it stops it from being absorbed as well as hydrating that area. And there's a few other brands you can use. Patients are advised to check the feet daily, report any redness, swelling and heat to us straight away, and check their feet daily with hands. Just run their hands over their feet daily, just to check that there's no concerns, any lumps or bumps, anything, scratches, anything like that. Neuropathy affects extremities, so hands aren't always the best way to check feet. So we recommend that patients put their feet in front of mirrors just to check the plantar surface of the feet every day, just to make sure that's okay. Diabetes can also affect eyes. So if patients live with any family members, they're also encouraged to get involved. Appropriate footwear. So good footwear is the podiatrist's bread and butter, really. A patient is advised to have 3 main things. A good depthy toe box, so something that if there is motor changes, there aren't going to be any rubs to the interphalangeal joints on the toes. Just something that's quite accommodating, a good soft material with a depthy toe box that there's no pressure applied to either side of the foot or onto the top of the foot. Midfoot support, so laces, Velcro, no slip-on shoes. Slip-on shoes are the devil. They don't offer any ankle support. As we get older and our gait becomes a little bit more shuffled, patients slide in and out of their shoes. If they're diabetic with motor changes, that area is going to be banging against the top of the shoe anyway. It's a injury waiting to happen, friction waiting to happen. Something with good rigid support like laces or Velcro, and a good heel counter, usually thicker than 2.5 millimeters, if not thicker if we can. So something like a trainer, something nice and thick just to absorb. As we heel strike, our heel's the first thing to hit the ground. It takes so much pressure through that when putting the heel on the ground for heel strike. Just a good solid heel counter helps to shock absorb, so it's not passing through patients' knees and up through the chain. Brands like Pavers, DBs, Skechers, Hotters, Cozy Fit are excellent. We're really lucky that we have DBs. Well, we did. It's closing down. We had DBs in Rushden. Wider fitting shoes is what it's also known as. They have a website. They are fantastic. They have in their brochure, which patients can request for free, they have a fold out foot chart, so the patient can put their foot on the foot chart. It tells them the length of the foot, the width of the foot, but also what depth in the shoe that they need as well, which is just excellent. So those brands are fantastic. They can be quite expensive. It's worth shopping around. We're very lucky that we've got Skechers at Rushden Lakes as well. It's one of the biggest outlets for Skechers in the country, and they do fantastic shoes, and they've quite often got a sale on as well, which is great. Slippers and house shoes. We ask that patients ensure that they wear something on their feet at all times. Wearing just socks or barefoot just isn't, it's not suitable. In our neuropathic patients or patients that have ischemia that cannot feel their feet because of sensation loss, if they were to stand on something, they might not know. It could sit embedded in the foot for months without knowing. Good glycemic control. Like all diabetes, under the diabetes umbrella, we just recommend that all patients have good glycemic control for a number of reasons. The lower the sugars, the lower the chance of infection. If then trauma happens, friction in bad footwear, less chance of infection. And this is the summary that we'd give patients, really, the 6 steps. Check your feet daily, check your shoes and socks before every use, moisturise your feet every day with urea-based emollients, try and keep as good glycemic control as you can, exercise, weight bearing or non-weight bearing, depending on mobility. You can do in-chair exercises, whether it's dorsiflexing your foot, plantarflexing your foot, rolling your ankles in circles just to get the circulation going in your feet. Just while you're watching TV, 5 minutes in the evenings. We try and recommend patients do some form of in-chair exercises, as well as knowing about Diabetes UK. Diabetes UK has some really, really fantastic resources for foot attack advice handouts and that type of, they've got videos and support for diabetic patients that is just brilliant. So that is me. Thank you so much for having me. I will give back to Melanie.
Thank you, Darcy. We didn't get those last slides that came up, but you were in
I'm sorry.
a full run of. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I'm so sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm
ever
so sorry.
Is we'll collate both slides anyway, and send them across if you're happy. If you can ping them to me, I will make sure they get distributed. I've got everybody's details. We've actually unlocked everybody's mics because I was losing the trail of questions. So if anybody has a question that hasn't been answered that they want to just ask Darcy while she's here, pop your hand up and unmute yourself. I think Craig's done it so that you can use your mic. Go, yeah.
Hi Darcy, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, hi. I did a over Teams training with Andrew, I remember last year before, and he advised using the Doppler for checking football. So my question is, if they do have monophasic pulses, do you advise ABPI before?
Oh, I'm ever sorry, your mic's going a bit crackly. I heard ABPI.
Yeah, if they have monophasic pulses in their feet, would you recommend ABPI before referral, or just first?
It really depends. If it's something that the practice can do, brilliant. Yeah. Definitely, yeah, I would recommend that. If it's not something like we don't do them in-house, we would recommend that be considered either at the practice or as a vascular intervention.
Okay, so if they have monophasic pulses but good sensation, do you risk that as moderate or?
That would be moderate, yeah.
Moderate. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's all right. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.
Don't have any more hands up. Anybody else? Any other questions they want to ask Darcy before she goes?
Darcy. Anything else? Thank you so much for coming today, Darcy. That's been brilliant. What I will, oh, we have got a hand. Hang on, just appeared. Hello.
Hello. Are there any free nail cutting services?
Not free. We were, so just to give you a bit everyone a bit background, 2013 I think it was, the podiatry team came into work one day and they'd been decommissioned. So from the podiatry team, the Diabetes and High Risk Foot Service was born. So led by a consultant, there was Maria Mosley. She's recently just retired. They're looking at filling her post, but it's a consultant-led service that is commissioned by the CQC, and we can only treat patients that have a long-term condition. So nail cutting was lost. We're not commissioned to do that anymore. So we recommend that patients consider coming in for a short course of treatment, so we can show relatives how to cut nails, and then they'd be discharged. We would recommend that if patients are visually impaired, or say a relative is visually impaired, which is quite common in older couples, that patients would consider using like a file, either an emery board or a diamond deb, which is what we use in clinic. They're diamond crusted files that can be sterilised with hot water at home, and patients just file maybe once or twice a week. That really reduces nails, and the chances of injury is a lot lower. There's Age UK, there's private podiatrists. Being diabetic, we'd recommend that patients see podiatrists. That being said, we have to charge a minimum. In private practice, we have to charge a minimum, not to undersell our colleagues, if we're with the Royal College of Podiatry. So it's quite often an expense that at the minute patients just can't afford, so they might then consider a chiropodist. Chiropodists, there's a lot of politics around podiatry and chiropodists. I'm relatively new to podiatry, so I'm not that caught up about it. But as long as a chiropodist has their insurance, then they're okay to use. As long as they've had the training and they've got their insurance to fall back on, then they're safe to use. It's just so important that patients use practitioners that have got the insurance. You see horror stories and you hear about them on on medical pages where patients have used chiropodists that aren't registered, and it all goes wrong. So as long as, sorry, I'm digressing. So as long as a chiropodist with insurance, a private podiatrist or Age UK use a relative that has good vision on a file as well. That's sort of what we fall back on.
Lovely, thank you. Is there anyone else? Questions? Yeah. I'm scared to say I don't think so, because then they all pop on. I think that's it.
Lovely.
Yeah, I think that's it. So Darcy, you will send the slides across for both those presentations, and I will make sure they get sent across to everyone, well, between me and Craig. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this afternoon. That's been really, really interesting, and we'll definitely circulate that. I will be in contact with you because I know we discussed maybe some face-to-face sessions.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, for people to have more of a hands-on session. So that's something to look out for everyone as well in the new year. We're just putting our heads together in our diaries to sort out some dates, and then we will advertise that. Lovely, great. Well, thank you so much, Darcy.
Thank you. I might just quickly say, if you don't mind, I've started emailing around all the surgeries in Northamptonshire to do in-house training, pretty much the same presentation, but do a neurovascular workshop and a footwear workshop as well. Although you've all attended today, most of the all professionals across NHFT have to do the training. So like I said, I've started messaging around surgery, so hopefully I'll see you all in person within the next 2 years at some point soon.
Lovely, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Darcy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, and thank you everybody for showing up as you do when we put these sessions on. If there's anything in particular that you would like covered, please do send me an email if there's something that or a topic that you think would be interesting to be covered at PLT. We're just shaping out February's and March's. I think we've got some people coming from sexual health. We're going to do some child health stuff. So there's lots of different bits and pieces coming through. But big thank you from us. And yeah, just keep attending, and we'll keep putting the courses on.